It's winter in New York, and a bearded, noticeably older Peter Parker stares in the mirror inside the bathroom of his penthouse. He gets dressed and puts on his wedding band before stepping out of the bathroom and into the dining area where his kids, May and Richard, are already having breakfast. That's right, guys, in this reality, we get to see Peter finally settle down and start a family. Of course, who else is there to father Mr. Parker's children other than the one and only Mary Jane Watson? Or should we say Mary Jane Watson Parker? That alone is worth the price of admission to check out this fantastic Spider-Man series. MJ comes into the room to greet her hubby, asking him if he had a good night's sleep. Peter pretty much says no because he's a little antsy for what's about to happen at work that day. Later, Pete arrives at, of course, the Daily Bugle, and surprise, surprise, what's the first thing he hears? J. Jonah Jameson screaming Parker, of course. But don't get it twisted, guys. This version of Triple J isn't the same that we know and love. In fact, he greets Pete as J. Jonah walks past, and it's revealed that he's looking for Ben Parker, the Ben Parker. There are 3 important things that you should know about this reality before we go on. 1, it's basically a relaunch of Marvel's old Ultimate line, but instead of going back to Earth 1610, they fully revamped the Ultimate Universe, and this is now set in a reality called Earth 6160. Secondly, prior to the events of this series, the supervillain known as the Maker basically altered 6160's timeline to prevent heroes like the Fantastic Four, and of course Spider-Man, from getting their powers, which caused the events of this reality to be significantly different from the mainline Marvel universe. And third, a battle between Tony Stark Jr., the original Iron Man's kid, and the Maker ultimately led to a tragedy striking New York that left scores of people dead, and Tony Jr. being branded a villain a year prior to the events of this series. Anyway, back to our story, we find out that Ben and J. Jonah are the managing editor and publisher of the Bugle in this world, and at this point, we find out why Peter was so restless the night before. It's because he, Ben, and the rest of the Parker family are about to attend the commemoration ceremony of the so-called attack that happened the year before. This series drops another bombshell on us when we find out that one of the victims of the tragic attack from a year ago was Aunt May. Plus, we even get a cameo from Matt Murdock here as he holds a eulogy for the families of the victims. After finishing his speech, Matt calls on Harry Osborn to take the podium. In this world, guys, Harry's now the head of Oscorp, and he too suffered a loss last year when Norman Osborn, his dad, died in the attack. But more about that later. Ben's actually a bit acquainted with Harry too, since he's interviewed Norman in the past. Later, Ben and Pete arrive back at the Bugle offices to find that J. Jonah's screaming inside the meeting room before storming out and making it known to everyone around that he quits. You heard that correctly, Triple J just quit the Bugle. Ben discovers that the reason why Jonah just quit his post is because Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, basically wants to turn the Bugle into his own propaganda pamphlet. The crime boss offers Ben J. Jonah's old position at the Bugle, but he ultimately decides to quit too and strike out with Jameson. Later, Kingpin survives an assassination attempt when his SUV gets bombed by a mysterious individual who looks oh so familiar, someone riding a hoverboard and wearing green metallic armor that has a goblin-like appearance. That night, Ben and J. Jonah visit a dive bar to talk about their next move. They plan on establishing their own publication. Peter's there too, but he doesn't take his uncle's offer to work with them, given that he's pretty much doing well working for the Bugle at the moment and has a family to think about. Pete goes home and tucks his kids into bed before having some quality time with MJ. And oh man, it's not every day that we get to see these two actually talk about their relationship, instead of, seeing Pete put on the Spidey suit before MJ tells him to go get him, Tiger. In this case, Peter feels that he needs to make a change in his life. He checks in with MJ and asks her how she'd feel about this. And the only thing MJ asks for her husband is whether whatever Peter wants to do would change things between them, to which he says, never. MJ calls it a night, but before telling Pete her trademark catchphrase, we finally find out what Peter meant when he mentioned this change to his wife. Remember that metal orb that May was fidgeting around with at the beginning of the story? You see, something curious and potentially life-changing happened to Peter last night. The man who was just minding his own business when a bright light flashed inside their living room. Peter turned to look where it came from to find a small box crackling with electricity as a voice called for his name. Pete touched the box and a holographic message of Tony Stark Jr., this world's current Iron Man, appeared in front of him. Tony then told him exactly what had happened during the attack from last year, that he's being framed and that he and his companions have escaped to the future 6 months from when this message is playing. Not only that, but Tony tells him about what happened to Earth 6160 thanks to the Maker, about how he altered its timeline to prevent people like Peter from ever gaining their powers and becoming superheroes, thereby robbing them of their destiny. But the most important part of the message happened when the box opened to reveal the metal orb that Pete has with him. Tony tells him that it contains a radioactive spider. In the present, with the rest of the Parker family in bed, Peter goes to their penthouse building's rooftop. He allows himself to be bitten, and from there, Mr. Parker's world was about to change in a big way. It only took a single month before newspapers like the Daily Bugle caught wind of this mysterious new vigilante swinging around the city. Now at this point, Pete hadn't come up with the iconic red and blue spider suit yet, so he was using the plain black suit reminiscent of the symbiote costume minus the classic white spider logo and the aggression, of course. One morning, Pete walks into the kitchen to see that May and Richard are having breakfast. May has a copy of the Bugle in hand with its headline featuring a photo of the web-swinging vigilante. They talk about it, and Richard thinks the whole thing is a hoax, but May believes it, and she's pretty scared of this masked vigilante. Later, Pete in his homemade black suit starts patrolling New York. He mentions that his body's changed a lot in the past month. His new body now requires a lot of food, and he's gotten super strong and agile. Still, he admits that he has a lot of work ahead of him. Peter has gotten the hang of swinging around the city, but he has yet to master how to properly land. Meanwhile, Ben and J. Jonah continue to plan out their new business venture. More importantly, Ben tells his best friend about a scoop that they might be able to work on, the person who's been trying to kill Wilson Fisk. They become even more resolute in pursuing this new newspaper they're establishing when they find out that the Bugle is not even covering this story, most likely at the request of Fisk himself. Somewhere else, Pete chances upon a masked burglar trying to get inside a building. This guy's wearing a pair of electric gauntlets, which gives away the fact that this is Earth 6160's version of Shocker. At this point, it's good to know that Pete doesn't lose his humor in most universes within the many Earths of Marvel, as he and Shocker get into a hilarious, awkward exchange about how much of a newbie Peter is when it comes to stopping crime. And just to show that Pete's a total noob in this reality, he even believes Shocker when the guy says he'll just quit breaking into the building and go home before offering Pete a handshake. Pete falls for it, so he takes Shocker's hand and, well, he gets electrocuted, thrown off the building, and into a dumpster. Later, Pete calls it a night when he gets home, chastising himself for falling for the old handshake trick. Thinking that everyone's asleep, he grabs some ice cream from the fridge, pulls his mask halfway up, and starts lounging on their couch. This makes him fail to notice that May has gotten up from her bed and has just seen him in his costume. The little girl almost screams, but Pete manages to calm his daughter down and tell her everything about his new life as a superhero. May agrees to keep her dad's secret, but on one condition: come up with a better non-scary costume. Meanwhile, Britain, one of the overlords of Earth 6160 directly serving under the Maker, confronts Wilson Fisk about his lackluster performance in being in charge of New York. Fisk tells Britain about the person who's trying to kill him, and Britain suggests that he let his bodyguard Bullseye deal with it. The next night, Pete goes on another one of his patrols and chances upon Shocker again. This time, Pete's not falling for any tricks, so he and the villain get into a fight. Peter gets the upper hand, and just when the Shocker is on the ropes, the electrifying burglar comes up with a story about how he's only robbing people to get medical treatment for his wife, and just like last time, Pete lowers his defenses and falls for Shocker's ruse. The supervillain blasts Pete off the building again. Unbeknownst to him and the Shocker, the same armored man trying to kill Fisk has had his eyes on the criminal this whole time. Pete goes home later that night and starts to think that maybe this whole superhero thing isn't his cup of tea, but he changes his mind when he finds a sweet note that May left him on the fridge door. A month later, MJ and Richard think that something's up with May and Pete, but the father-daughter tandem firmly denies it. But they're up to something alright. The little Parker girl is helping her dad find the perfect superhero costume. Pete tries out different suits, from ones that resemble the symbiote costume to something that looks like the one Scarlet Spider wore. May doesn't like any of these, but in the end, the two Parkers find the perfect one, that iconic red and blue classic Spider-Man suit. Later, Jonah and Ben move into the new office building they bought with their savings. It's a fixer-upper, but still, Ben's nephew admires what he's doing with Jonah. They agree to share information about possible scoops with each other, and Pete finds a bulletin board containing Ben and Jonah's research on Wilson Fisk's armored assailant. Upon finding this out, the wall crawler decides to look for this guy, which the media is now calling the Green Goblin. So Peter spends the next few days as Spider-Man trying to meet the Goblin. He almost quits the stakeout until his spider senses alert him, and he discovers that the Goblin is right in the middle of a fight against Bullseye atop New York skyscrapers. Spidey gets on the scene and sees Bullseye getting the upper hand, and Webhead intervenes when he sees the sharpshooting supervillain about to deliver Green Goblin the killing blow. But as you can tell by now, Pete is still new to all of this. Bullseye gets the best of him and slices off a crane to crash it down on both Spidey and the Goblin, commenting that he's going for a twofer killing these two vigilantes. Green Goblin and Spidey manage to evade the crumbling crane, but Bullseye gets a hold of the battle-damaged armored vigilante again. Bullseye prepares to finally kill his original target, but Green Goblin goes full Admiral Akbar and tells his enemy it's a trap. Right then and there, Spidey jumps out of the wreckage and socks the sharpshooter right in the jaw with a solid left hook that puts his lights out. The Goblin then uses his glider to subdue the unconscious villain and take him away. With Bullseye out of the picture, Green Goblin and Spidey get to talking. The armored vigilante activates his suit to take control of Spidey's mask and take it off, exposing the man under it, Peter Parker. In turn, the Goblin reveals his secret alter ego, Harry Osborn, and they decide to grab a drink and get to know each other a little better. It's now April, and we find Peter and MJ inside a rather fancy bar. She asks her husband if it's a good idea to have this double date with Harry and his wife, but Pete reassures her that it's all good. Shortly after, Harry arrives in the restaurant and Pete introduces MJ to him. The new head of Oscorp tells him that his wife's running a little late, but he immediately receives a message that she's in front of the establishment the moment he says that. And it's here that we get the big reveal that Harry Osborn's wife is none other than Gwen Stacy. Yeah, that Gwen Stacy. The group then gets some dinner and they talk about things you'd expect from couples getting to know one another. You know the deal, career, kids, that whole jazz. Gwen finds out that MJ is running a PR firm and shows interest in her when she hears this. While all this is happening, we see that Uncle Ben and J. Jonah have actually been tasked with babysitting the kids. The two old journalists talk about their latest venture, the new publication that they're planning to launch, and it turns out that MJ helped them with naming the paper. It's gonna be called The Paper. Triple J says that he didn't really like the name at first, but he ultimately admits that calling their newspaper, well, The Paper, has a certain ring to it. Back at the restaurant, Harry and Gwen find out about the new publication that Ben and Jonah are doing, and their whole conversation takes a more serious turn as they start talking about this new vigilante swinging around New York. Gwen thinks that it's a good idea that there's going to be another paper that might potentially cover this masked crime fighter, considering that the Daily Bugle is not doing a very good job on this front. Because remember guys, Fisk is basically the owner of the Bugle right now, and it's in his best interest to keep coverage about Spidey as superficial as possible. Gwen also expresses her opinion that she's pretty much pro-Spider-Man since she believes that this vigilante's existence implies that there's something deeply wrong with their world. That's not to mention too that she and Harry are impressed with Pete's talent in photography. Hell, they even nudge him to leave the Bugle and take his talents to Uncle Ben and Triple J's fledgling paper. Gwen then excuses herself to go to the ladies' room and MJ comes with her. Mrs. Osborn basically tells MJ that she's more impressed with her and asks her for a favor to have a meeting with Ben and Jonah because Gwen is planning to fund the publication as a way to rebel against Fisk and the Bugle. At the dinner table, Harry realizes that Peter hasn't told MJ that he's actually the web-swinging vigilante going around New York. Harry then reveals Gwen knows he's the Green Goblin. Now, Harry doesn't necessarily force Pete into telling his family about his secret identity, but he does make a good point when he tells his friend that there's no way he can keep this up forever. Hearing that, Peter admits that he actually has reservations about his new crime-fighting career he's got himself into, but Harry tells him that if he's brave enough to do it, then Pete should be too. Because to Harry, he's just a guy in a suit. He can only imagine the good he can do if he had Peter's abilities. He tells Pete that it's up to them, people working outside the system, to save the world. And in a rather refreshing twist, it's Harry that drops the immortal line to Peter that with great power comes great responsibility. After the double date, Pete and MJ walk home. He asks her what she thinks of the Osborns, and MJ admits that she likes them, although they're kind of intense. Peter then asks his wife if she agrees with Gwen and Harry's opinion that their world needs heroes, to which MJ answers with a solid ride or die line when she tells her hubby that she doesn't need heroes because she has Peter in her life. In a flashback from a year ago, before the events that shook New York's foundations and killed scores of its citizens, we see Norman Osborn, Harry's dad and then current head of Oscorp, impatiently waiting for his son at a lavish gala. Norman's wife reassures him that Harry has a good reason for running late, but Norman is hearing none of it. They then get a call from Harry, who profusely apologizes to his dad, but he and Norman just end up in a huge argument when the older Osborn chastises his son for not living up to his family name. However, their squabble is cut short when an explosion hits the building that Norman and Harry's mom are in. From a short distance away, Harry can see a crimson ball of energy engulf the structure and realizes that something unimaginably horrible has just happened to his parents. Weeks pass and Harry finds himself and his wife, Gwen Stacy Osborn, meeting with their family lawyer to finalize Norman's affairs. The long and short of it is that Harry and Gwen are the only known legitimate Osborn family members left alive in this world, so they're gonna inherit everything. The meeting was just about to end when their lawyer tells him that there's just one more thing that he should know, as he hands Harry a card with a king's chess piece printed on it. He asks his lawyer what the card means, but he has no idea. What he knows, on the other hand, is who sent it to Harry. The next day, Harry goes to a heavily guarded penthouse with the calling card in his hand. It's revealed that the person who sent it is none other than Wilson Fisk, the crime lord better known as the Kingpin. Wilson asks Harry if he knows who he's talking to, and Harry tells him that he's well aware of the so-called Kingpin of New York. Fisk needs a favor from the new head of Oscorp, and like a true mob boss, Wilson is even able to spin his request to make it look like Harry should be thankful that he was the one chosen for this task. Specifically, Wilson wants Oscorp to buy off all his shares in the Stain Stark company, while Harry has his reservations but ultimately agrees to it just to get the gangster off of his back. 2 weeks pass after that meeting and we find Harry, Gwen, and Oscorp head of R&D, Dr. Otto Octavius. They've discovered the late Tony Stark's workshop where he kept all of his Iron Man suits. Harry and Otto are in awe of what they see inside Tony's old lab. Gwen, on the other hand, thinks it's just a case of boys and their toys. To her, the real goldmine is in the Stark database, which they promptly hack into. Within Tony's old computer, they find a treasure trove of Iron Man suit blueprints and lists of corporate assets. But what really piques their interest is a section inside the database that simply says History World. And in this point, the trio discover the secret origin of Earth 6160, and after 4 months, we find out that Dr. Octavius has just finished work on a suit that Harry commissioned him to create, the same armor that he'd be wearing as the vigilante known as the Green Goblin. This new suit basically contains Stark tech, and Otto even crafted what would be the Green Goblin's signature grenades to go along with the ensemble. Then, the genius scientist tells Harry to put on his new helmet. He wants to show his boss something. Harry does so and finds a map of the city with a few red dots. Otto informs him that each dot represents a piece of Stark tech that has been activated somewhere in the city. But here's the kicker: the image that Harry just saw was from a couple days ago. Otto shows him the map in its current state, and he finds that there are now hundreds of these little dots peppered around it. They have no idea what's causing all the Stark tech to suddenly activate, much less why this is happening simultaneously. So Harry tells his friend and employee that he's going to take his brand new suit for a spin to investigate this. Now this happens around the same time that Peter first got his spider powers, and Harry sees him getting dunked on by Shocker on one of the New York's many rooftops. It turns out that Harry has been following one of the signals from the map, which ultimately led him here, because Shocker is wearing a pair of electric gauntlets made by Stark tech. The Green Goblin tells the 2-bit thief that he just wants the gloves and to find out where he got them in the first place, so he makes a deal with Shocker. Tell him everything, hand over the tech, and Shocker can keep all the money he stole. The villain agrees to this and tells Harry that he just got lucky a couple nights ago when he tried to rob an apartment somewhere in New York. When he got inside, he found that whoever lived there was already dead. More interestingly, there was a box in front of the dead guy with a hologram of Tony Jr. being projected from it. Well, long story short, Shocker grabbed the box, opened it, saw the gauntlets, and decided to use them as his own tools to help him with his criminal career. Right after finishing his story, Shocker decides to screw over Harry and hit him with an electrically charged punch. This does nothing to Mr. Osborn thanks to his new green Stark armor, so he knocks out the criminal and, true to his word, leaves the money there. Fast forward to a couple months before the present day of the series, Harry and Peter just met, as they mentioned in issue 3, and they go out for drinks. The two get to talking and ultimately suss out that the same people who basically handed Harry the keys to the Stain Stark fortune and the secrets that come with it are the same people who altered history to stop Peter from becoming Spider-Man in the first place. In the end, they decide to work together to find out the truth about the world. Now, we move forward another couple of months to the present day. We find that Harry has taken Bullseye, Kingpin's bodyguard, captive inside his lair. We discover that Harry has been torturing the hitman ever since he got his hands on him, but it doesn't seem to be working thanks to the exoskeleton grafted to Bullseye's entire body. Bullseye also reveals that he purposely gouged out one of his eyes as a way to revere his quote-unquote master before pretty much telling Harry that he's not going to leak out any information. At that point, Harry questions whether he's a hero or something else entirely. As he gets ready to torture Bullseye some more, he simply says that he'll find an answer to the question soon enough. Sometime later, during an otherwise ordinary morning in June, Peter walks in on the Parker family having breakfast. To the shock of Richard, May, and MJ, they see that Pete's face is all banged up. So of course, they ask him what happened. Pete tries to wave the conversation off and tell them that everything's alright, he just had an accident at the Bugle. But the Parker family isn't a bunch of dummies and they know that something is up. The secret ultimately comes out when May, in her excitement, almost blurts out that Peter got injured being a superhero. The little girl realizes that she just outed her dad, but Pete reassures his daughter that it's all right. At this point, MJ and Richard have no doubts that Peter is hiding something from them, so he comes clean and tells them the entire story, not just about what he's doing outside his job at the Daily Bugle, but about how he got his bruises. It all happened last night when Peter and Harry were staking out the Fisk building. We find out that they're planning on confronting the crime boss and roughing him up to get some answers about the Maker and his council. Pete's a little antsy about all this, saying that he's never tried to break into anyone's home before, but he ultimately agrees to it. Before going in, they get into a small argument about using codenames whenever they're in costume when Harry mentions Peter by his real name. Harry responds to this by telling his friend that neither of them have a codename, but Peter lets him know that everyone's been calling him the Green Goblin, which Harry likes. Shortly after that, they get on with their mission and burst through Fisk's sunroof. There, the crime boss was waiting for them. He informs the two vigilantes that they're a couple of idiots for not recognizing who they're dealing with, because Fisk was already 10 steps ahead. He'd been watching Peter and Harry stalk him in the previous days when the two were doing their stakeout. The Kingpin was well aware that it was only a matter of time before the Goblin and the Spider made their move, and now, here they are. Wilson asks what they want from him, and Harry tells the crime boss that they want to know who he's working for. This piques Fisk's interest, which prompts him to ask where Harry got that idea. The armored vigilante tells him that Bullseye spilled the beans, and this is the first time that Spidey's hearing this. But it turns out that the Kingpin was just biding his time to finish his drink and grab a remote. At that moment, Peter's spider sense kicks in, but they're too late to react as Fisk presses a button on his remote, which traps the three of them inside a cage. A split second later, Harry is sent flying when Fisk hurls his whiskey tray right at him. Spider-Man immediately springs into action and webs up the mobster's face, but Fisk gets the best of him and manages to grab Peter by the neck. Before he could deliver the killing blow, however, Green Goblin blasts the Kingpin with an energy ray before throwing one of his patented grenades. The explosive detonates, but Harry's shocked to find it barely did anything to Fisk other than burn his shirt off, and we find out that the man has got some tattoos all over his body. More importantly though, Wilson reveals that he's had some work done recently, as he tells Harry that there might have been a time when his grenade could have injured him. Fisk lunges at the Green Goblin, and we find out the extent of the Kingpin's augmentations. He's able to crack Harry's helmet with a single punch. The Goblin falls down and desperately tries to defend himself from the mobster, but Spider-Man arrives in the nick of time to rescue his buddy. The wall crawler wraps his entire body around Kingpin's arms, but the big mob boss just grabs Pete and slams him to the ground before wailing on the masked crime fighter. Spidey takes several shots to the face before Harry recovers and calls forth his glider to crash into the building. The resulting explosion knocks back the Kingpin, and realizing that their whole fact-finding mission has gone south really quick, Harry and Pete choose to take the L and escape instead. In the present, Peter finishes coming clean to the rest of his family. Richard's not too happy about the fact that his dad did a whole B&E with Harry, but Pete tells the kid that he had to do it and stop something way more evil. May then asks her dad if he's planning on a rematch with Fisk, and Pete all but says yes. Meanwhile, MJ can't help but be worried and asks him if they're going to be safe. Peter reassures everyone that no harm will come to the Parker family, but it's important that his secret identity as the web-swinging hero of New York remains a secret between the four of them. Pete then tells his family that the only reason he hid it from MJ and Richard up until now was because he couldn't find the right moment to reveal it. His wife and his son understand Pete's dilemma, so they let it go. At this point, Peter just wants to have a private talk with MJ, so he sends the kids to bed. Afterwards, the couple go into their bedroom like a typical husband caught in a lie. Peter braces himself for MJ's wrath. But she tells him that she's not mad at all. Rather, MJ feels a mix of pride, fear, and admiration for what Peter is doing as the masked vigilante. They fall quiet for a bit, and Pete correctly guesses that his wife wants to see his Spidey suit. So he puts it on, and MJ thinks it suits Peter well. She then asks him what she should call him whenever Peter is in costume, and he replies by saying that maybe MJ's marketing savvy can help with that. Well, she points to the spider emblem on his chest and tells her husband that the codename he's been looking for has been right on the costume the whole time. Moments later, Peter goes out and takes MJ for a swing around New York, now donning the name Spider-Man. It's July. Somewhere deep inside Oscorp, Dr. Otto Octavius tinkers with the Green Goblin's suit. We find out that both Harry Osborn and Peter Parker are here too, as Otto gives the wall crawler a hypothetical question about how beautiful the Goblin armor is. Peter agrees with Otto while munching on a sandwich before asking, who is this guy? Harry reintroduces the genius to his friend and tells Peter that Otto is one of the smartest people he knows, and he's right, because Otto, as far as we know, is the only person on Earth right now who has any idea of what makes Pete and Harry's suits tick. First off, both the Green Goblin armor and the Spider-Man suit are Stark Tech, a company whose assets has been acquired by Oscorp. But here's the thing, Otto adds that the best way to explain how the two suits work is to treat the Goblin armor as a sort of 1.0, while Pete's Spidey suit can be considered as version 2.0. According to Otto, the Green Goblin armor is something that he can wrap his head around. That is to say, it's a piece of super advanced technology that's basically the perfect war machine, but it's not so advanced that Otto couldn't pretty much modify and manipulate it for Harry. The same can't be said for Peter's Spidey suit though. Otto takes a sample of it as he explains that the webbed latex-like material protecting Pete when he does some sort of superheroics is something else entirely. He calls it Picotech, a highly adaptable and transformative material. Otto admits that he's currently stumped and would need to further study the sample he took from the wall crawler. Otto turns around to put the vial of Picotech away, and Pete takes this opportunity to ask Harry if it's a good idea to bring Otto into the fold, considering that their life under the mask is a secret that only a select few know about. In reply, Harry tells his friend to just relax and let Otto cook. And, as if on cue, Otto continues to debrief Harry and Pete about more details concerning their Stark Tech-produced costumes. He explains that Harry was able to take control and shut down Pete's suit when they first met because these things are subject to network commands, a feature that Pete proposes to remove right away, to which Harry agrees. More interestingly, we find out that both Harry and Pete haven't even unlocked the true potential of their respective superhero suits. As Otto puts it, both have been running on safe mode this whole time. In truth, each of them has an onboard AI that could pretty much make their superheroic efforts much easier in the future. All it would take to activate is to turn it on and provide it with some sort of AI personality profile, a base level consciousness that basically serves as the framework for the onboard AI's voice and responses. Otto tells them that he's already prepared a few templates for the two superheroes, such as profiles used by the likes of Napoleon, Caesar, Lincoln, and Gandhi, but Pete opts to base his AI personality on himself. On the other hand, Harry chooses to go with one based on his late dad, Norman. Somewhere else, Mary Jane takes Gwen to the offices of the paper to give her a tour of her latest investment, but they find that both J. Jonah and Ben, the paper's founders, have gone out. That's because the two veteran newsmen are currently inside a basement parking lot to meet a source that would help them with the potentially explosive story they're investigating. We then discover that this inside guy that they have is none other than their old friend and colleague from the now Wilson Fisk-controlled Daily Bugle, Robbie Robertson. Robbie hands them the files and they quickly take a look at it. The contents of the files are enough to bring Triple J and old Uncle Ben to a pause. They take a beat and ask Robbie if he's sure he wants to share this sensitive information. Robbie says that he is, considering that there's no way that the Bugle would publish this story. Jonah then asks Robbie if he'd be interested in leaving the Bugle for the paper, and their old friend says that he'll eventually join them. But for now, the best move for all of them is to keep Robbie as their inside man within the Bugle. Both Jonah and Ben agree with this, and they even express how proud they are of Robbie for being such a rebel. While all this is happening, the secret meeting among individuals pulling the strings of the city and of the world meet at a black site. And out comes Captain Britain, who asks his right-hand man Bullseye if their guests have arrived. By guests, Britain means Wilson Fisk. They meet inside a large hall where Britain asks him what happened to one of the agents that he loaned Fisk, who curiously happens to be another Bullseye. The same one who Harry captured and has secretly been holding hostage at this very moment. Fisk says he has no idea where his Bullseye had gone off to. Hearing this, Britain supposes that he and all the other members of the Maker's Council, the people tasked with ruling this world, have a big problem on their hands. To counter these threats, Britain offers to hand Fisk control of an entire team of Bullseyes. However, the Kingpin refuses, stating that he's going to beat his adversaries, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, on his own terms. This piques Britain's curiosity, and he asks Fisk how exactly he's planning on beating these vigilantes. In answer, Wilson tells the Frenchman that he doesn't have a single plan. He has 6 of them. Sometime later, Spider-Man and Green Goblin spar inside one of the Oscorp's secret facilities. It turns out that the reason behind this kind of training is for Otto to gather the necessary intel to help them craft their suit's onboard AI personality profile. Otto reiterates that there's no turning back once they activate it, to which the two superheroes give their consent. Otto then presses a button on his device which zaps the Spider and the Goblin. Seconds later, Harry begins to hear the voice of his late father inside his suit. On the other hand, Pete hears, well, himself as the onboard AI takes his personality profile complete with clever quips. Harry then tells Peter to get back to training and go another round with him. The web slinger thinks it's not such a good idea, but Harry, as usual, reassures him that this is the right call. So the two heroes face up against each other and spar again. Pete is surprised to find out that Harry's now able to perform moves that he couldn't back when their suit's onboard AI were offline. He manages to give the web slinger a couple of good hits, but Spidey counters with a thwip of his web and a punch to Harry's face. This prompts Harry's AI, which is based on his dad, to basically berate him when Harry starts losing the fight. We then get a glimpse of Harry's daddy issues when he becomes more focused as his dad's AI voice continues to berate him. Ultimately, Harry gets so angry that he charges up a unibeam from his chest and blasts Pete with it. Pete then checks his AI voice to diagnose the suit, to which it says that they're all within acceptable levels. In a hilarious remark, Pete's AI voice adds that Harry might need some therapy. Suddenly, Spidey and the Green Goblin's sparring session is interrupted when Otto detects a third signal from within the room. Harry helps Pete get back on his feet as Otto tells him that they have a problem. The two heroes rush to the doctor's side, who tells them about the signal that he detected. Otto tried to block it, but it somehow knew how to bypass his attempts. And from there, a portal opens in front of the three men as none other than Iron Man, aka Tony Stark, emerges from it. True to his promise, Tony asks Peter one thing: if he's become a hero yet. It's August, and we find Peter staring blankly at a black sphere sitting on a shelf. This sphere is the same Picotech suit that he owns, currently dormant inside his and MJ's bedroom. MJ calls for him. He doesn't answer right away, which prompts Miss Watson Parker to ask her husband if anything's wrong. Pete reassures the love of his life that everything's fine. MJ believes him and tells Pete not to forget to pick up the cake before he heads for the kid's birthday party later. MJ leaves, and again, Pete is left alone with the Picotech sphere on the shelf. He reaches for it, but Pete ultimately decides against it after reminding himself about the Parker family rule that no superheroics must come between their private bonding time. All of a sudden, Pete is shaken when the sphere's onboard AI speaks to him, and as you'd expect from a couple of Peter Parkers bantering with each other, a bit of mischief ensues between the two. Still, Pete can't help but wonder how the suit is doing this independently, or more so, what else the Picotech suit is capable of. Well, The little sphere gives him an answer, telling Pete that it's capable of all kinds of things. Peter gets a little freaked out and tells it that he has to go, but he reassures the suit that they'll talk more about this later. In a flashback from about a month ago, we see Peter asking Tony about his suit when he arrives inside the Oscorp-owned training facility. Unfortunately, even the young Stark has no idea about it. According to Tony, the Picotech suit was the last thing that Tony Stark Sr. ever created before he passed. In addition to that, Tony admits that he can't even begin to comprehend how to create something as advanced as this. Still, the wall crawler wonders why he got it. Why was this suit handed to him? To that, Tony tells Peter that he was on top of the list, the same record that helped Tony determine the rightful heroes of this world. It's the same list that was born out of the Maker's crusade when he tampered with reality and denied this world of its saviors. And according to Tony, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, was one of the most important figures on this list, someone who the Maker deemed too dangerous to his plans. Otto and Harry remark that they don't know anything about this, even after combing through the Stark files that they got after Oscorp took over it. He steps up to Harry and accuses him of lying, but Tony just calls Harry a thief before using his Iron Man armor to deactivate the Green Goblin suit and reveal his face. Tony recognizes Harry and in turn accuses him of stealing his birthright. They get into an argument about who owns what in terms of Stark tech, but cooler heads prevail in the end. The young Stark drops the subject as Spidey asks what their next move should be. Tony then tells the wall crawler that the Maker will return in a year. In the meantime, he should prepare for the man's arrival. Tony was just about ready to leave when Harry asked him where he was on the list. He tells Harry the truth, that he was never mentioned at all, but Tony does tell Harry that he's got potential considering that he's hanging out with someone like Peter. Before flying off, the Stark boy tells Harry to keep the suit and the company. He'll grow into it and maybe, just maybe, become a hero that this world needs. In the present, Pete, Ben, and J. Jonah are in the bakery to pick up the kid's birthday cake. Pete's surprised that Jonah came along considering that the man's a bit of a grouch, but in any case, Pete does his errand and the three make their way to the party. While walking, Ben and Jonah try to offer Pete a job again at the paper, but as before, Pete still has his hang-ups with leaving the Bugle, but he reassures the two that he'll eventually be part of their publication. Shortly after, the Parkers celebrate May and Richard's birthday at an arcade. J. Jonah and Richard share a moment when the old man gifts the boy with a copy of his self-published book, while Peter Parker is playing Dance Dance Revolution. But unknown to them, or most of the rest of the world, something shady is about to go down inside Fisk Tower, because at this very moment, Wilson Fisk has gathered the other secret rulers of New York's 5 boroughs. We then get introduced to each one of them courtesy of Fisk's trusty assistant, Mr. Wesley. First, there's Martin Lee. The man leads 2 lives. In the day, he's a rich philanthropist who runs the local feast shelter, but at night, he becomes Mr. Negative, the leader of a criminal gang called the Demons, and someone who possesses mind control abilities. Lee has an iron grip on Queens and does not suffer anyone who tries to step into his territory. Still, Wesley tells Fisk that this man's temperament makes him the most dependable of his lieutenants. The same could not be said for Walter Hardy, aka Black Cat, ruler of the Bronx. Hardy was once the greatest cat burglar in the world who used all his stolen assets to take control of the borough. He has since retired, or so he would have everyone believe. In truth, Walter still goes out at night as the Black Cat, not to further expand his riches, but simply to enjoy the thrill of being a master thief. This same fact makes him unpredictable and dangerous, according to Wesley. But as he puts it, there's someone more dangerous than Hardy, the ruler of Staten Island, Sergei Kravenov, aka Kraven the Hunter. From Russia, he was exiled by the mutants and has since set up shop in the US. According to Wesley, Sergei is a killer through and through. Then there's Mysterio, the boss of Brooklyn. Wesley admits that they know nothing about this lieutenant other than that. Finally, Wesley introduces us to the last of Fisk's 5 lieutenants, Mole Man. And as he tells Wilson, this man is his oldest and most loyal comrade, which makes him all the more dangerous. Unlike the other lieutenants under Kingpin, Mole Man doesn't rule a specific borough. Instead, he rules everything beneath it, the world underground. With the introductions out of the way, Wilson tells each of his lieutenants about the vigilantes that have been recently plaguing their domain. Sergei presumes that Fisk wants Spider-Man and the Green Goblin to be taken out. But the Kingpin has a more entertaining idea. He proposes that they make a game out of it. Another month passes. It's now September. We find Triple J and Ben Parker inside a bar, seemingly drinking their woes away, but they reassure the bartender that they're celebrating something. MJ walks into the bar and wonders why they're looking like a couple of glum chums, and we get the big reveal that the periodical that they founded, The Paper, has debuted and proved itself to be a fast-rising publication. But we also find out the reason behind Ben and Jonah's dissatisfaction. It turns out that they're not too happy that The Paper has been only running stories about Spider-Man's exploits up until now. According to them, they want to cover more serious stories, not something as sensational as this. Hearing that, MJ reassures the two that The Paper is quickly growing its readership, and in the coming months it's bound to get bigger. Having said that, MJ pretty much tells Jonah and Ben that they could run whatever story they wanted. At this point, they've enticed readers with the proverbial icing. It's time to get the whole cake. In the end, MJ lifts the two men's spirits when she tells them that they could all get back to work. Somewhere else, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin enter another one of Oscorp's black sites. There, they meet Otto, who has some good news for the two vigilantes. First, he's found out a way for Harry's suit to get rid of whatever control or influence Stark has on it. To do this, Otto has applied a carrier frequency that will modulate on a daily basis to allow Harry to never lose control of his suit, all the while preventing any Stark tech from taking over. After that, Otto presents Pete with a new suit after admitting that he didn't have a single clue on how to upgrade the Picotech material that he's been wearing this whole time. Pete tells Otto to give him a second as he invites his onboard AI to sidebar, something that Harry remarks Peter has made a habit of. A short distance away, Peter has a discussion with the Picotech AI, bearing its own personality. The AI is pretty sure that Otto just wants to give Pete a new suit so that he can keep the Picotech inside the Oscorp lab, something that it wants no part of. Its suspicions are only confirmed when Pete asks Otto what his plans are to do with the Picotech suit afterwards, to which the doctor tells him that he plans on keeping it contained for further research. Peter agrees with the suit's AI, so he comes up with an alternative instead. He'll take the new suit, but he'll keep the Picotech inside the Parker residence. Afterwards, Otto unveils the new suit he made for the wall crawler. It's a relatively bulky thing called the Spider Armor Mark I. Basically, it has all the abilities you'd expect from the Stark Tech-derived equipment, that is, except for camouflage, which is something that the Picotech suit can provide, but a feature that Otto can't seem to reverse engineer. Upon seeing the spider armor, Pete only has one thing to tell Otto: I think I'm good. Unsurprisingly, the doctor feels offended by Pete's refusal, but Harry manages to break up the tension in the room and instead asks Otto to go back to the drawing board to give Spider-Man something that's a little bit more his style. At the paper, Jonah and Ben are busy preparing the big story that they've been investigating since they established the company. Later, at a different part of the city, Spidey and Green Goblin are out on patrol. We find out that Otto has provided Pete with a new suit, and it's a low-tech one. Instead of arming the wall crawler with a bevy of technological doodads, the doctor decided to go back to basics and give him a simple suit made of a spandex Kevlar fabric blend. The two vigilantes are having a chat about their holiday plans when the wall crawler's spider sense suddenly kicks in. A nanosecond later, Spidey leaps out of the way when a projectile shoots his way. He dodges it, but it ends up hitting Harry, causing the Green Goblin suit to short out. When Spider-Man turns, he finds that it was Walter Hardy who ambushed them. Walter then attacks Spidey after introducing himself as the Black Cat. The Master Thief uses his whip to try and hit the web slinger. Hardy misses his shots, but Pete finds out that Hardy was setting him up to bring him down under a water tower over his head. Shaken, Spider-Man tries to recover after getting toppled by the water tower. Hardy then takes this opportunity to tell the superhero that Kingpin wants him and the Green Goblin to be taken out permanently. He then wraps his whip around Spidey's neck and tries to choke him out. Meanwhile, Harry sees this and desperately calls for his onboard AI within his suit to go online so he can help his friend. Hardy continues to squeeze the life out of Peter, but the wall crawler manages to dig deep and hurl the Master Thief away before subduing him with his trademark webbing. Finding himself unable to move, Hardy assumes that Spidey's gonna kill him, but the wall crawler tells the attacker that he's being ridiculous before checking up on Harry. With Spider-Man's back turned, Hardy secretly pulls out a laser sword to free himself from the webbing. He then approaches the two vigilantes. At this moment, Harry's suit completely reboots, and when he sees Hardy approaching, he doesn't think twice to blast the man with his repulsor ray, which then sends the Master Thief falling several stories below. Harry and Pete are shell-shocked when they see Hardy's unconscious body lying on the street. They immediately call for an ambulance to whisk the Master Thief away as the two vigilantes get into an argument. Peter thinks that Harry crossed the line, but the Green Goblin insists he made the right call after seeing what Hardy might have done to Peter at that moment. Still, the wall crawler reminds Harry that they have to hold themselves to a higher standard than their enemies. However, Harry doesn't agree with this. According to him, he would not hesitate if he's ever put in a situation where he had to choose between that or saving Peter's life. And well, Pete's actually touched when he hears this from Harry, so he drops the argument and tells the Green Goblin that he and Gwen are still invited to Christmas at the Parker household. In October, we see Ben and Jonah going on a trip. The two newsmen are headed for a certain exclusive country club, and they're not going to play a round of golf either, because when they eventually reach their destination, Jonah and Ben spot the man who might be able to help them get to the bottom of the story they're investigating, the Kingpin's right-hand man himself, Wesley. So they pretty much ambush Wesley while he's having breakfast. Ben and Jonah inquire about Fisk's connection to the liquidation and purchase of Stain Stark to an offshore company, even going as far as finessing their way into a face-to-face with the Kingpin himself. But Wesley remains stone cold and keeps his mouth shut until security arrives and escorts Jonah and Ben out of there. A week later, we find out that Ben and Jonah have successfully furthered their research into the matter as the two correctly discover that Oscorp was the company who ultimately acquired all of Stain Stark's assets. So they set up a meeting with their main investor, Gwen Stacy Osborne, a week later. Now, it's not like Jonah and Ben are a couple of scummy amateur journalists. They actually have the decency to warn Gwen that she's about to hear something that might upset her. However, Gwen assures them that she's a tough girl, so they start with their inquiry. Ben and Jonah tell her that they know all about Oscorp acquiring Stain Stark, but this just opens up more questions, such as why the company is working so hard to keep that a secret, and more strikingly, why is it that mass vigilantes and criminals suddenly popped up right after Oscorp acquired Stain Stark's assets? Ultimately, what Ben and Jonah want to know is if Oscorp is secretly financing these masked individuals. Well, Gwen immediately proves that she's not that tough when she loses her temper after hearing all of this. Later, at the Parker residence, we find out from MJ that Gwen called her to tell her about the meeting with Ben and Jonah. Ben admits that he was not expecting that their investigation would lead to Gwen and Oscorp and expresses his genuine concern about their company's prospects. That's because they're in too deep now. For one, we find out that Peter has left the Bugle to come work for the paper full time. For another, Ben doesn't want to jeopardize MJ's own marketing business and put a wedge between her and Gwen's friendship. MJ reassures Ben that she'll be fine and that Gwen isn't exactly what she'd call a friend. All she needs is more time to line up additional advertisers for the paper to keep it going, even without Gwen's funding. Ultimately, MJ asks Ben if he and Jonah are sure about this story, to which he says yes. Their conversation ends with MJ reiterating that Gwen is still one of her clients at the moment and she wants to know how long she has before the paper releases their story. To that, Ben says Gwen and Oscorp have 1 week. 2 days later, Harry meets with Ben and Jonah at a cafe somewhere in the city. Harry asks about the story they're writing. The two veteran journalists tell him that they suspect either he or Gwen is under the Green Goblin armor, a piece of tech they acquired from Stain Stark. Harry basically cops to it and tells the two to keep his wife's name out of their damn mouth. But cooler heads prevail when Ben and Jonah reassure Harry that they're not doing a story meant to out him as the Green Goblin. What they do want to know is why Fisk allowed Oscorp to purchase Stain Stark. After all, it's because of this sale that Harry is capable of waging war against the Kingpin, along with Spider-Man. Harry then hands them a thumb drive containing everything he found out in Stark's old lab. Specifically, it contains the details about the Maker and its council. According to Harry, this thumb drive has everything, including the true events that led to the Stark's apparent downfall. He warns Ben and Jonah that they're going into a very dangerous rabbit hole that could put their loved ones at risk. To Harry, this is the same reason he wears the Green Goblin mask, to prevent his enemies from finding out about Gwen. However, Ben and Jonah reassure him that they know what they're doing. That night, Ben and Jonah are in the paper's offices. They've just put the finishing touches on the big story they're doing. They're well aware that putting their name on this is a death wish, so the two men craft a fictional journalist under the headline, a pen name, so to speak, Ben Reilly. And this imaginary writer is about to tell the story of New York's Kingpin, specifically about who's controlling Fisk deep in the shadows. It's now November. Spider-Man perches on one of New York's buildings while out on one of his usual patrols. He gives Harry a call since they agreed to do this together, but he only gets a message from his partner's answering machine. Out of options, he tries to ring Otto to ask the doctor where Harry is right now, but a bank robbery nearby forces Spidey to drop the call before Otto could tell him what he knows. With that, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man springs into action and stops the criminals inside the bank. We find out that these are no ordinary thugs. They're actually members of Mr. Negative's crew, the Demons. Spidey proceeds to knock out a few of the criminals and, as you'd expect, engage in some quippy banter with the ones he hasn't dealt with yet. And as you might expect again, a classic Karen starts berating Spidey for trying to be a hero. So Pete is forced to quit giving out zingers and proceed to take down the remaining bad guys. He knocks out almost all of them but discovers that the last remaining demon has taken the Karen hostage. Karen feels vindicated as Spidey expresses how much he's tempted to just let the criminal take her out in spite of his moral code. Still, the wall crawler proves he's a true hero when he webs up the last remaining gang member. And just to make sure that the Karen shuts her trap, he thwips her with webbing in the mouth too. However, the wall crawler is taken by surprise when Mr. Negative emerges from the vault at the back of the bank. Lee tells Spidey that he knows what he and the Goblin are capable of, especially after what they did to Hardy, something that's hard to forget and impossible to forgive. Spidey tries to let Mr. Negative know that he didn't intend for Black Cat to be hurt, but the crime boss has had enough talk at this point, so he uses his powers to control the hostages' minds as they proceed to attack Spider-Man. Pete does his best to escape without hurting the mind-controlled citizens as Lee leaves with the rest of his men. Later that evening, an obviously battered Spider-Man slinks back home where he finds MJ waiting for him, and she's not too pleased with the sight of him. In true Peter Parker fashion, he tries to smooth talk his way out of a scolding from his wife by complimenting her, but there's no stopping MJ. MJ tells him although she's relatively taken this whole crime fighting thing in stride, but she's now at a point where she can't help but freak out, especially after seeing her husband come home all ragged like that tonight. That's not to mention all the photos he's taken of himself as Spider-Man for the paper, where he's usually seen in life or death situations. But make no mistake, MJ's not here to give her husband an earful. We all know this by now, but Mary Jane Watson Parker is Pete's greatest confidant, so she only asks Peter one thing: to promise that he'll tell her if she should be scared. Peter reassures MJ that he'll be the first to tell her to run if that day ever comes, but as he puts it, there's nothing to worry about. Pete wholeheartedly believes that he's right where he needs to be, doing what he's supposed to do as Spider-Man. MJ changes the subject and asks Peter if he wants to fool around. But you can always trust that old Parker luck to put a damper on things when Peter remembers he has to meet with Ben tonight. Somewhere else, Fisk berates Lee for letting go of Spider-Man after encountering him at the bank. However, Lee makes it clear that he did not have the wall crawler on the ropes. At best, it was a stalemate, especially after Lee realized how easy it was for Spidey to take out all of his men. Mole Man wonders why Lee didn't use his powers on Spidey. According to Mr. Negative, Spider-Man's will is just as strong as theirs, which means he wouldn't fall under his spell. Hearing this, Sergei reiterates that they have to take out Spidey, especially now that these vigilantes have taken out Hardy. But Hardy expresses that he's far from retired when he chastises Sergei for even thinking so. We do find out that Hardy has become paralyzed since he fell from that building. Mysterio tries to intimidate him into giving up his spot within Fisk's inner circle, but we immediately discover that Hardy has no plans of ever doing that. He tells everyone in the room that he might be wheelchair bound for now, but we get the reveal that he's passed on the title of Black Cat to his daughter, Felicia. This whole squabble between the lieutenants makes Fisk lose his temper. They don't own anything. Everything they have belongs to him, and they only rule their respective territories at his discretion, because there's no way he's gonna let these vigilantes ruin his so-called kingdom. Meanwhile, at Memorial Park, Peter meets with his Uncle Ben after he receives a DM from Harry apologizing for ghosting him earlier. The two Parker men are here to commemorate the first year anniversary of Aunt May's untimely passing during the cataclysm that hit New York. However, that's not the only reason that Ben asks his dear nephew here. Ben has correctly discovered Peter's secret life as Spider-Man. It's no surprise either, considering how easy it was for him to find out Harry was the Green Goblin. Ben then asks Pete how many people know, and he tells his uncle about it. But Pete's more concerned about whether Jonah already knows about his alter ego, to which Ben tells him it's only a matter of time before Jonah uncovers it. Knowing all this, all Ben could do is tell Pete to be careful, to try harder, and make sure that MJ and the kids don't get roped into things. Hearing this, Pete tells Ben about the same discussion he had with MJ earlier. Ben then asks Pete if he'd truly know if the time came where his family should worry, and he tells his uncle that he believes so. What he does know for certain is that he's strong enough to do something about it if push comes to shove. At that moment, Peter asks Ben why he does what he does, considering he's just a regular guy, to which the old man says it's all a matter of someone standing up to all the evils in this world. Their conversation is cut short when Pete gets another message from Harry telling him to meet with him, so he bids his uncle farewell, but not before Ben reminds him of what's at stake. Simply put, Peter is in too deep in the game now. He must always keep his family's well-being in mind from here on out. Another month passes. It's now December, and we see Ben and Triple J arrive at the Parkers' loft for their annual Christmas get-together. Richard greets them at the door, and Ben asks the boy if they missed anything. Richard tells him that the party's only about to start, as the two veteran reporters see that the Parker residence has other guests as well. Ben notices that this year's crowd seems different than before, to which Richard tells his grand uncle that their family friends, the Brocks, couldn't make it this year. Instead, this Christmas party is attended mostly by the members of the Watson clan. There's Mary Jane's Aunt Anna, who Ben already knows. Ben recognizes MJ's sister Gail, and both he and Richard can't help but be surprised that she attended this year's shindig. And then there's Madeline Watson, Mary Jane and Gail's mom. Jonah asks Ben and Richard about her, and we find out that Madeline is, well, let's just say not the type to win Mother of the Year anytime soon. Simply put, Madeline Watson is what you may call a modern woman. According to Ben, she's a world traveler, a 3-time widow, and an occasional mother to her children. And you know what, guys? Even Richard knows all about this. In the kitchen, we get treated to a classic all-American dinner as Madeline pretty much hovers and criticizes MJ's culinary skills like they were on an episode of Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen. The tension barely breaks when Mayday walks in on both of them to borrow MJ's phone so that she can play some games in the corner. But after that, the two Watson ladies continue to trade barbs at each other. MJ asks her mom how long she plans on staying in the city this time, which Madeline takes as MJ's way of telling her that she's a nuisance. Things get awkward between MJ and Madeline as things just become all the more uncomfortable when the older Watson woman spots Ben and basically announces her intentions of hitting on the man. As for Peter, well, he's just chugging along, being a good husband and host as he assists MJ with tonight's hors d'oeuvres. Ben and MJ manage to have a moment for themselves and they check up on each other. Meanwhile, Gale approaches his niece and asks Mayday if she remembers her. Mayday says that she knows her aunt, but MJ arrives and pretty much tells Gale that there's no way Mayday remembers her because they haven't seen each other since she was 2 years old. Like we said, guys, a bit of drama here. Mayday then tries to grab MJ's attention to tell her mom that Gwen Stacy is calling, but MJ just tells her to send it to voicemail. She then sends Mayday away so she and Gale could talk. Things start to get even more awkward inside the Parker household when MJ demands an apology from Gale. It turns out that Gale insulted MJ in the past by basically criticizing her for marrying Pete and having kids with him. Meanwhile, Ben and Anna catch up with each other. Their conversation is interrupted when Madeline approaches and teases Anna a bit. And say what you will, but Madeline is a woman of her word. She goes full cougar mode and starts flirting with Ben right after that. They then find out from Anna that Gail attended this year's Watson Parker family Christmas party because she's having a hard time right now due to her divorce. Back at the kitchen, Mary Jane unloads her feelings towards her side of the family to Peter. He doesn't say a word and just lends an ear, but it works marvelously too, as Pete gets a kiss on the cheek for being such a good listener. In the other room, Richard and Triple J have a nice little chat. We find out that Richard has finished reading Jonah's memoir, and their conversation eventually veers towards finding love. Jonah suggests that when the day comes that Richard starts to get interested in that, he should just fake it until he makes it. At the same time, MJ grabs Gail to have a private conversation and bury whatever hatchet they had with each other. MJ presses Gail and asks her why exactly she attended this year's Christmas dinner after basically skipping out on all the other ones that came before. Gail finally tells her sister about her divorce, and MJ commiserates with her. But again, Mayday walks in to tell her mom that Gwen is calling. MJ tells Mayday to just ignore her calls, and that she'll give her a ring later. Mayday leaves the two Watson sisters to continue their talk. MJ assumes that Gail is looking for some emotional support, which is why she attended this year's Christmas dinner. However, Gail reveals that that's not exactly the case. You see, Gail initially thought that going to MJ and Pete's home would make her feel better after seeing how quote-unquote boring their lives were. The joke's on her though, because seeing MJ, Pete, and the kids just made her feel worse about her divorce. Gail pretty much admits that she's jealous of how normal the Parker household is, something that she had secretly wanted all along. This whole confessional clears the air between the two, and the sisters make up. Don't feel too bad for Gail though, because on the bright side, she didn't sign a prenup for a cheating husband. While this is happening, Ben and Jonah share drinks and Triple J expresses his interest in trying to date Anna. The two men then toast each other for the year that had just passed. Mayday, like before, tells her mom that Gwen is calling again. MJ finally picks up her phone to hear a panicked Gwen on the other line. MJ notices the urgency in Gwen's voice, so she calls for Peter and they take the conversation in their bedroom on the loudspeaker. We find out from Gwen that her husband Harry has been missing for 6 days. Gwen wonders if Pete knows where Harry is right now, so MJ checks with Peter to see if he's heard Gwen's question. Now you might have noticed that Pete hasn't exactly had a single thing to say this whole time. Well, here's your answer. As MJ tries to touch her husband on the shoulder, she notices Pete's entire body turning into black powder, which then transforms into dark tentacles writhing in front of her. MJ is shocked. She knows this isn't her husband, but we can tell that this is Pete's Picotech suit gone rogue. Then, the figure that looks like Peter Parker turns around to reveal a pair of jet black eyes, telling Mary Jane 2 words: Merry Christmas. As for the real Pete and Harry, well, suffice it to say that they're having the worst Christmas ever, because right now, one of Wilson Fisk's lieutenants, Sergei Kravinoff, aka Kraven the Hunter, has taken the 2 men hostage inside his private chamber. It's late January in New York, the 31st to be exact. For weeks now, the city's newest crime fighter, the so-called Spider-Man, has been missing in action. Curiously though, the people of the Big Apple took towards the cityscape to see an all too familiar web slinger swinging around the city. However, we soon find out that this is not the Peter Parker we know and love. For one, this Spider-Man has traded the trademark red and blue for a black and white suit. And perhaps more telling that this isn't the OG web slinger is when we see Spidey crash land on top of one of New York's buildings. Our questions are answered mere moments later as the black suit Spider-Man mask gradually unwraps the vigilante's head to reveal that it isn't Peter underneath it. Instead, it's his firstborn son, Richard. On top of that, we find out that Richard had bonded with the Picotech suit that Peter had been stashing in the Parker residence ever since the beginning of this saga. Richard and the suit are actually training in the fine art of web slinging, and as the suit puts it, Richard's been improving. Funnily enough, the Picotech suit takes on the form of Richard's dad Peter while they talk. And while Richard does not appreciate this piece of tech doing that, what's more is that we discover that the suit has been impersonating the OG web slinger at home in order to keep Peter's absence a secret from the rest of the world, which is a cause for concern for Richard. On the bright side, the Picotech suit does clarify that it and Pete laid out some ground rules in the event that the web-swinging hero went missing in action. That is to say, the Picotech suit's prime directives are: 1. No funny business with MJ. 2. Protect the Parker family at all costs. And 3. No funny business with MJ. With that out of the way, the young Parker boy can't help but worry about what's happened to his dad. The suit reassures him that Peter's probably fine, but when Richard asks how it knows that, the Picotech suit tells him that it's just a feeling that it has. After all, hope is the only thing that they have right now, considering that Peter himself refused the suit's offer to keep tabs on him and the rest of the Parker family using its own tracking capabilities. In any case, Richard chooses to drop the topic and continue with his training as the suit latches onto him and he turns into the black-suited web slinger yet again. Somewhere else, deep within the bowels of Staten Island, in a place only known as the Kingdom of the Mole Man, Kraven meets his fellow New York lieutenant. We find out that Kraven has not informed the rest of their group, much less Wilson Fisk, about the fact that he has both Peter and Harry Osborn in his hands. Mole Man knows all too well how risky this is, but Kraven reassures him that it's no big deal. To him, Peter and Harry are the necessary pieces for what he deems would be his quote-unquote greatest hunt. And if you're wondering what this mohawk-wearing big game hunter is on about, well, suffice it to say that he plans on releasing his 2 hostages here in Mole Man's kingdom so that he could, well, hunt them. As Mole Man puts it, his kingdom is not a soft land, it's a savage one. Still, there's no changing Kraven's mind. All of a sudden, both Kraven and the Mole Man are taken by surprise when an unexpected visitor appears before them. It's none other than their fellow lieutenant, Mysterio. Kraven thinks Mole Man screwed him over and snitched about their secret meeting to the crystal ball-headed illusionist, but Mysterio makes it clear that he alone discovered this brewing conspiracy. The big game hunter gets all defensive, thinking that Mysterio wants to stop him from engaging in his little game, but as the master illusionist tells him, he, along with Mole Man, just wants to see where Peter and Harry are being held. Kraven obliges and shows them the hostages, who are sitting in front of a sloppy banquet that he had prepared for them. To the deadly hunter, he put out this spread to give Peter and Harry the nourishment they need for the upcoming hunt. After all, there's no fun taking down starving animals. And to make sure that they play by the rules, Kraven installed a bomb collar on each of them. Kraven reveals that he at first thought of making Peter and Harry fight to the death for their amusement. Ultimately though, he found the idea to be too pedestrian for his tastes, which is why he came up with this great hunt. More concerning, however, is the fact that Kraven knows everything about his hostages now, and how Harry is the head of Oscorp along with his wife Gwen, and about how Peter Parker has his sweet Mary Jane and 2 loving kids. Of course, Harry and Peter remain firm that they're not going to go along with Kraven's game, but the testosterone-fueled hunter proposes something that changes their mind. To be specific, Kraven tells them he'll leave their families alone if they could take him out during the Great Hunt. If Kraven wins though, then Peter, Harry, and everyone they hold dear will go the way of the dodo. Having no other choice, the suitless Green Goblin and the battered Spider-Man agree to Kraven's offer, and with the press of a button, they fall through a trapdoor leading straight into the jungles of Mole Man's savage kingdom. Peter and Harry scamper to get their bearings, but then their bomb collars suddenly start beeping. They fear for the worst, but the collars suddenly unlatch, and Kraven reveals he's just been messing with them the whole time. He didn't ever intend to spoil his fun with these explosives. What Kraven wants is simply to put the fear of God into his hostages to proverbially soften the meat until he catches them. Pete and Harry pick a random direction to start to make a run for it, as the web slinger tells his best friend their best option right now is to run in a straight line until they hopefully reach the edge of this place, and maybe, just maybe, they can escape their captivity. However, Harry isn't on board with this idea. According to him, escaping now means that they'll definitely be putting Gwen, MJ, and the rest of their loved ones in danger. Their conversation is cut short when Pete's spider sense kicks in just as one of the Savage Land's reptilian citizens is about to pounce on Harry. Peter jumps into action and beats the life out of the ravenous raptor, only to find out that it didn't come alone. The rest of the dino pack prepares to attack them, and the best advice Pete can give right now is 3 words: do not move. Back above ground, Richard continues his Spider-Man training well into the night. In fact, Richard and his suit are just fresh off of thwarting a petty criminal on the streets of the city that never sleeps. Their celebration is cut short when Richard's webline is snapped off with a bladed projectile. Richard crashes on top of a nearby rooftop. He turns to see Felicia Hardy, the daughter of the late lieutenant and master thief Walter Hardy, making her way towards him. Felicia's out for blood as he mistakes Richard for the OG Spider-Man, telling him that he knew her father, the Black Cat, and with Walter out of commission since falling off a building in the past, Felicia has taken on his mantle. As you'd expect, Felicia comes out swinging, all the while putting the blame of what had happened to her dad on Spider-Man. On the other hand, Richard tries to defuse the situation by telling her he's not who she thinks he is. Still, Felicia's having none of it. Ultimately, Richard is forced to unmask and introduce himself to the Black Cat. It works too, as Felicia stands down and finally believes that the 15-year-old boy in front of her isn't the guy that she's been looking for. By the end of their exchange, Richard and Felicia get acquainted with each other. Back in the Savage Land, we find out that Peter and Harry have assimilated to their surroundings to some degree. Not only were they able to tame the 2 raptors from before, but they even chowed down on the dino that Peter took out earlier. Night falls, and as Peter stands guard while Harry rests, the OG Spider-Man can only worry about what's happened to MJ and his kids. The next day, our heroes continue their trek across the Savage Land. Tensions rise as Peter insists they escape this place and hide their families. Then, and only then, can they suit up and take care of business. But Harry knows his best friend might not have the heart to do what's necessary. Out of nowhere, the raptor they're riding takes a slug to the head. We discover that Kraven had just found them and sniped the poor beast. Meanwhile, Kraven continues to take pot shots at his targets, which forces Peter and Harry to take cover. Knowing that that it's only a matter of time before the hunter pins them down, Peter makes the call and tells Harry to run for the jungle while he distracts Kraven. Thanks to his spider sense, Kraven's rifle shots hit nothing but air as Peter dances around them before he, too, runs for cover in the jungle. Pete and Harry reunite shortly after, well aware that he's just going to slow down his friend. In an interesting twist, Mole Man suddenly approaches them and offers his assistance to the two. Understandably, Pete and Harry are highly suspicious of Mole Man, as the lord of this savage land escorts them around an underground passage with the help of his trusty moloids. And when they ask Mole Man why he's helping them, all the minuscule villain tells them is this: it's none of their business. After seeing Peter and Harry off, Mole Man meets with Mysterio, and we find out that Mole Man double-crossed Kraven by letting Mysterio in on their conspiracy to keep Peter and Harry in his kingdom. Unknown to Mole Man, Kraven has just found out about this betrayal. Meanwhile, Richard and Felicia get to know each other better on top of the water tower in the middle of the city, as we discover Felicia really didn't want to be the successor to the Black Cat mantle. It's just her family business. In fact, she unloads all of this on Richard, who's an absolute gentleman. But when she asks Richard about his dad, the Picotech suit advises the boy to keep mum's the word about this. So he respectfully denies answering Felicia's question, which just piques her curiosity even further. In the Savage Land, Peter and Harry emerge from the Moloid's cave to find that they're nearly at the edge of the godforsaken place. Naturally, Peter grows more anxious by the second, fearing for the worst about what Kraven and his pals might have done to the rest of the Parker family. On the other hand, Harry reveals that he's not too concerned about Gwen. As he puts it, he and his dear wife each have this so-called danger liability. It's basically a 1%er version of insurance. Simply put, if either Gwen or Harry disappears, their account kicks in and they get a high level protection and security. It's a plan that Otto came up with, as Harry reveals. In fact, Harry tried to purchase Peter and the Parker family a plan, but he ultimately canceled it, knowing that Pete does not trust Otto. In any case, Pete just wants to get out of this place. The sooner he gets to his family, the better. While this is happening though, Mole Man witnesses a truly gruesome scene, because not too far away from the tunnels, the same group of moloids he instructed to help Pete and Harry have all been brutally taken out. All except one. Mole Man asks the surviving moloid what happened here, and the poor guy tells him that Kraven took out all his friends to get information about where Pete and Harry are headed. At the same time, our two heroes are just about to reach the Savage Land exit when Kraven starts spraying them with his Gatling gun. Pete tells his friend to retreat to the moloid's tunnel as he catches Kraven's attention. The web slinger dances around the barrage of bullets until the hunter empties his mag. It's here where we find out that Pete and Harry have been expecting this, as Harry detonates the bomb collars that they've been hidden among the trees to deliver a blow against their assailant. It's enough to hurt the hunter, but Kraven can still stand, so Peter decides to get their hands on the villain, and the two get into an old-fashioned fight. And sure, Kraven might be an expert with firearms, but the man's an absolute scrub in the art of throwing hands. Peter easily overpowers Kraven. Hell, he even snaps his rifle in half with his bare hands before going for a full mount and delivering the hunter some savage ground and pound. But in a moment of clarity, Pete stops before he can put the hunter 6 feet under. Harry, on the other hand, urges his best friend to do what's necessary. After all, letting this villain live would mean that they'd have to look over their shoulder for the rest of their days. But Pete remains firm. He's not going to take a life, even if someone as deplorable as Kraven. In turn, Kraven does him dirty and shoots Peter in the gut with his magnum. Curiously, Peter wonders why his spider sense didn't kick in the moment Kraven pulled his gun. To that, Kraven reveals that he wasn't aiming for Pete, and when the wall crawler turns around, the next thing he sees is Harry Osborn's lifeless body lying on the ground. This causes Peter to absolutely lose it as he pounces on the hunter and attempts to turn Kraven's face into mush using his fists. He only stops when Mysterio suddenly appears and tells Peter to focus on rescuing his family right now. The web slinger clears his head and chooses to spare Kraven's life before making a beeline for home. Shortly after, Pete reunites with Mary Jane. He gets her up to speed with everything that's happened to him and Harry, and ultimately, Peter tells his beloved wife that their family now needs to go into hiding. It's now March, and the Parker family has found themselves settling at a trailer park by the Grand Canyon to lay low for a while. Being the good guy that he is, Peter can't help but blame himself for everything that's happened. But you can always trust a ride-or-die woman like MJ to lift Pete's spirits. Their little daughter May has also just woken up and stepped out of their trailer just as the Parkers' sweet but nutty neighbor David greets them with a cup of coffee. We learn from David that this trailer park is mostly populated by societal outcasts. You know, UFO conspiracy theorists and the like. They're good people for the most part, just a bit out there. After a bit of catching up, David asks May what she and the rest of the Parkers are going to be up to on this fine day. The little girl tells him that they've seen a few of the Grand Canyon's attractions, most of which are home to UFO activity if David is to be believed. However, David suddenly gets all twitchy when he hears May mention that they're going to visit a place called the Ark. David turns to Peter and warns him that the Ark gives him the heebie-jeebies, telling him that there are rumors that people have disappeared there. Later on, we find out that Richard and Felicia had gotten closer to each other since their first meeting, as the two DM each other. By the end of their conversation, Richard almost invites Felicia to a date when he and the Parkers eventually come back to the city. You can always trust telecommunication companies to ruin a good time when Richard's message fails to reach Felicia's inbox. Still, this day isn't all that bad for Richard, as we discover that Pete has taken the boy under his wing to become a couple of web-swinging heroes, and today's order of business is to check out the Ark. Before that though, Peter talks to the Picotech suit and makes it clear that their top priority is to keep Richard safe at all costs whenever they're out doing Spidey things. The suit agrees, and the two web slingers make their way to the Ark shortly after that. As David has told Peter earlier, this place has some really bad Scooby-Doo vibes going for it. Pete and Richard investigate the area. A second later, Peter's trademark tingles kicks in, and they turn to see a gigantic man made of sand is about to grab the OG wall crawler. This sand man grabs Pete and tries to hurl him toward the tower in the middle of the facility, but Spidey recovers before he crashes into the structure. All the while, an automated voice from the tower starts speaking. It counts down, and it culminates with a devastating electrical shock targeted directly at the looming Sandman, which makes the creature crumble. However, it only takes a few moments before the huge creature reassembles itself and starts using Peter to try and batter the tower. On the other hand, Richard eventually figures out that the giant isn't trying to attack them, so he takes it upon himself to engulf the tower in his Picotech webbing. This causes the tower to malfunction, and surprisingly enough, the giant man made of sand transforms into a regular guy. This man thanks them for rescuing him and informs the web-slinging duo that he was kidnapped by a secret organization when he came across this place some 3 years ago. They experimented on him, which ultimately turned him into a creature who could turn his body into sand. After hearing all of this, Peter understandably isn't happy with how this guy went about his cries for help. After all, he could have just used his sand body to spell out the word help if he wanted to avoid the whole first meeting scuffle nonsense. In any case, the man thanks Pete and Richard. That night, Pete and MJ have some alone time where they catch up on what happened with each other's day. We find out that they've been trying to reach Gwen ever since the events in the Savage Land, but all their calls have been straight to voicemail. On the other hand, we also learn that Peter and his uncle Ben regularly check up on each other via an untraceable phone call with the help of one of Peter's friendly neighbors. Pete and Ben speak in code to make sure that they can't be tracked. After the call, we find out that Ben and his partner J. Jonah Jameson have a few unwelcome visitors in the paper's offices: Wilson Fisk, his assistant James Wesley, and a quartet of bullseye goons. You see, Ben and Triple J have been building a case to expose Wilson and the Makers Council, the bigwigs who have been pulling the strings of Earth 6160 from the shadows. Now, the paper has been working with an informant named Ben Riley in order to aid them in their mission, but it seems that this partnership has come to an end as Ben and Triple J find out that Wilson and his group have taken out anyone named Ben Riley that they could find. Ben makes the mistake of thinking that Wilson eliminated all the Ben Rileys in New York. In reply, Wilson does his best Ozymandias impression and tells Ben that no, they didn't take out all the Ben Rileys in the city, they took out all the Ben Rileys on the planet. Simply put, this is all an effort to shake down the paper. As Wilson puts it, he actually wants the paper to keep messing with him and his secret organization. After all, it's a good bit of fun reading the stories they come up with, and with that, Wilson makes his exit. James tries to rub salt on the wound by asking Ben for a comment. Instead, Ben just gives him one of the most badass lines you'll hear from an old journalist. As Ben puts it, when all this is done, when the wrongs have been righted and the shadows lifted, I'm the guy who's gonna write their obituary, and you can quote me on that. It's now April, and we find Gwen Stacy Osborne in front of her late husband's grave not long after the tragic events in Mole Man's kingdom. All the while, Gwen reminisces about her past, talking to her father. As he puts it, your loved ones aren't really gone, they continue to live on. Gwen's next memory moves the clock forward to the time where she and Harry were still boyfriend and girlfriend. Their sweet conversation is cut short when Gwen suddenly receives a call from someone informing her that they found her dad. Then Gwen recalls another core memory from her youth, one where her dad told her that everything he did, does, or will do is all for her. More importantly, this is the moment where Mr. Stacy entrusted his so-called legacy to Gwen, and curiously enough, we see his eyes glow green when he tells her daughter this. We get another glimpse into Gwen's past. It turns out that Gwen's dad used to be Mysterio, and that the legacy he told Gwen was basically all about her taking his place as the master illusionist. We find out that the Ultimate Universe doesn't have a single Mysterio. As a matter of fact, there are 5 of them, with each one forming what could be described as a council of Mysterios. Lastly, the Council of Mysterios appears to be led by an old man named Quentin Beck, and at this very moment, we see Gwen finally get inducted into their secret society as she speaks their oath. Gwen's next memory is on her wedding day. Here we see her dance with Harry's dad, Norman, who expresses his surprise at how his disappointment of a son was able to get someone like Gwen. Norman actually admires Gwen. He sees she's way more than just a blonde trophy wife, so much so that he makes Gwen promise to not let Harry get in the way of her personal goals, a promise that Gwen keeps. After that, Gwen remembers one Christmas when Harry gave an original first print copy of a book about the occult called The World That Is and the World That Was, which was authored by a man named Dr. Jericho Drum. Harry thinks that Gwen just has a bit of a fascination for conspiracy theories, but she corrects him and says the book is actually about the theory that they're living in a world with 2 timelines. Gwen's recollection after that moves the clock forward to about a year ago, back when she, Harry, and Otto discover the files about the Maker and his secret after they acquired Stark Industries. It's revealed that she presented all their findings to the Council of Mysterios. What's more interesting is that we find out that the Council had been digging into this topic long before the events of the entire Ultimate-Spiderman series, and we soon learn the Council of Mysterios plan on releasing this information to the world to wake them up to the truth. However, Quentin tells Gwen that they should be extra careful with how they go on about this. As Quentin puts it, the late Mr. Stacy's mistake regarding this matter was the same thing that led to his untimely passing. From there, we find out that all of Gwen's interactions with Harry, Peter, and MJ were motivated by her and the Council of Mysterio's mission to shed more light into the true workings of their universe, in other words, the Maker. Fast forward to a few months ago, at the time when Craven had abducted Harry and Pete, Gwen found out about this thanks to the efforts of one of her fellow Mysterios, who told her about where the big game hunter took her husband and friend. It's also because of the Council that Gwen became aware of the danger liability insurance that she and Harry had. So Gwen confronted Otto about this and promptly fired him on the spot. Again, the clock moves forward. This time, it's from a couple of months ago, the same moment when Craven was about to shoot Pete and Harry, and this is perhaps the biggest reveal. We find out that Gwen, who was dressed in her Mysterio suit, pulled Harry away from Craven's line of sight and replaced him with a body double. That's right, it turns out Harry is still alive. After rescuing Harry, she approaches Craven and puts a slug between his eyes as retribution for what he did to her husband. In the aftermath, Harry gets absolutely confused about what is going on. In response, Gwen finally comes clean and reveals her secret identity to Harry. And now, back to the present, we see Harry walking up to his beloved wife, as we learn Gwen's master plan was to save Harry so that any and all suspicions about him being the Green Goblin would be eliminated from the public's eye, most of all, their enemies. Now that all the pieces are in place, Gwen and Harry basically declare war against the Maker as they walk away from his supposed grave. It's May, and we find out that there are a few other people who are about to learn that reports about Harry Osborn's death were exaggerations. One of them happens to be none other than Ben Parker. Right now, Harry has paid Ben a visit to ask how his best friend Pete and the rest of the Parker family are doing. Ben suggests Harry give Pete a call to clear things up, and he does consider it. However, Harry didn't come here to do that just yet. Instead, this visit is more of a courtesy call for Ben to let him and their friends and family know to keep their heads down while Harry and Gwen escalate the fight against Wilson and the Maker's Council. Later, at Oscorp's building, Gwen has a surprise visitor, the Daily Bugle's Robbie Robertson, who has just presented her with information that she's been looking for. Mr. Robertson happens to also be one of the Mysterios. Their meeting is cut short when Gwen's assistant notifies her that her next appointment is on the way to the office, Wilson Fisk. Robbie leaves as Wilson and James walk into the room. Wilson pretty much just came here to intimidate Gwen into continuing Oscorp's forced partnership with his office. He then steps out, entrusting James with the rest of the details about this joint business adventure. Now alone in her office with yet another bombshell when James reveals that he's also another one of the Mysterios who's working for Wilson in order to spy on him. More importantly, James hands Gwen a valuable amulet that belongs to the Council of Mysterios, an artifact that she plans to use in her and Harry's war against the Kingpin and his lieutenants. James leaves and Gwen tells Harry to come out of the other room. As we soon find out, it seems that Gwen and Harry's war is something that the rest of the Council of Mysterios don't know about. In any case, Gwen tells Harry that she has the amulet for one whole week before telling her husband that it's time for them to make a move against their enemies. Later that day, Harry goes to a local, discreet mom-and-pop grocery store, which is one of his secret Green Goblin labs. What's more is we learn that Harry has rehired Otto to continue the man's work on the Green Goblin suit, and at this point, that makes two people outside of Gwen and Harry himself who know that he's still alive and well. Otto tells Harry that the Green Goblin suit is good to go. However, Otto still needs a few important items if they're going to continue their work. Namely, the big brain scientist requires a particle accelerator and a pocket-sized nuclear reactor. You know, your typical mad scientist stuff. In addition to that, we also learn that Harry is keeping an eye out for Peter and the Parker family, as we find out that he had instructed Otto to plant bugs inside their home in case the Kingpin's men came looking for them. Harry puts on his goblin helmet and gets another earful from Norman Osborn's AI-derived HUD. Right after that, he and Gwen suit up and head off for their mission to sabotage a weapons manufacturing facility that belongs to one of Wilson's lieutenants, Mr. Negative. We learn that Mr. Negative and his gang actually took over a residential building somewhere in the city and forced its residents to work at the weapons factory, creating so-called demon bombs for his gang. Harry and Gwen take out the goons inside the factory. Harry doesn't feel too comfortable that Gwen has taken point in this mission, as she orders him to rescue the innocent civilians working at the facility while she deals with the explosives. Still, Harry follows her orders while Gwen uses her skills in the illusionary arts to trick Mr. Negative's demon gang members into hacking one another with their katanas. Meanwhile, Harry manages to save all the innocent civilians who are forced to work at the factory, all the while listening to his father's voice berate and criticize his decisions. Once he's done, Harry heads over to Gwen's location and asks her if she's defused the bombs. Gwen has the most cold-blooded response as she tells her husband that she never said she was going to defuse them, only that she was going to take care of them. And with that, Gwen detonates all the explosives inside the building, taking down any demon gang member left inside. Harry wasn't too pleased with what Gwen just did, but she retorts by telling her husband that, well, this is war. She'll do everything that's required to win. On top of that, Gwen pretty much checks Harry when she tells him that it was his idea to do what needs to be done at all costs. Still, the Green Goblin can't shake off the feeling that something's off with all of this. Later, at the trailer park near the Grand Canyon, Peter receives a call through one of his neighbor's telephones. He picks it up to hear Uncle Ben's voice telling Pete that someone wants to say hello. A second later, Peter hears Harry on the other line, asking him to come home. As Harry puts it, he needs his best friend's help. And you know who else is in the room with Harry and Ben? It's J. Jonah Jameson, and he too knows that Harry has not bitten the dust. Now it's June, and we find ourselves in the middle of an airstrip in Utah. Pete, MJ, and May stand near a plane that has just landed nearby. In the meantime, the web slinger asks his beloved wife if she's really okay with what he's about to do. MJ gives him her blessing. Harry gets off the plane and the Parkers finally reunite with their good friend. Not only that, but we find out Harry did not come here alone. He brought a couple of babysitters with him. And by babysitters, we mean good old Uncle Ben and J. Jonah have tagged along for the ride so that they could stay in Utah to look after the rest of the Parker family while Peter and Harry do their thing back in New York. Pete greets Jonah and the newsman asks him where Richard is right now. As we learn, Richard isn't too happy that Peter isn't letting him join in on this ongoing war against Kingpin. But when Ben asks why in the world would Richard even think he had any business beating bad guys' heads in, Pete plays it coy and says that it's better if they see what the boy has been up to this whole time. With the pleasantries out of the way, Ben and Jonah walk towards their Jeep along with May to give Pete and MJ some privacy before he leaves. And after wishing him luck, the rest of the Parker family heads off towards the trailer park as Pete and Harry prepare to board the plane. Now alone, Peter asks Harry the question that's been bugging him ever since he got off the aircraft. Where is Gwen? Well, as we find out, Miss Stacy Osborne is currently in a meeting with the rest of the Council of Mysterios, and it's getting heated. This mainly stems from the fact that the entire council now knows that Gwen and Harry have declared war against Kingpin, not to mention the Maker's Council. Quentin Beck doesn't hide the fact that he's absolutely displeased with what Gwen has done. As he puts it, their council makes decisions together, and on a more foreboding note, Quentin shows a bit of his totalitarian attitude as he mentions that there's no forgiveness for revolutionaries and radical thinkers in this world. On the other hand, Wesley accuses her of using their council's resources for her own personal gain, namely rescuing her husband. Gwen hears this and she stresses that couldn't be farther from the truth. As she puts it, her actions may have pushed the council's timetable, but she doesn't regret her decisions. Throughout all of this, Robbie Robertson keeps a cool head, although he does make it known that they now have a mess on their hands. Wesley, on the other hand, is out for blood, since Gwen and Harry's actions have pretty much placed the entire council in direct conflict against Wilson and the shady organization he's working for. Still, what's done is done, and all that's left now is the plan for the next big move. In light of this, Quentin asks his fellow Mysterios if they have to deal with the Mole Man, given that he's one of the few people outside of the council who knows exactly what happened to Craven. In response, Wesley reassures everyone that Mole Man's involvement has effectively turned him into an accomplice, so there's nothing to worry about on that end. At least for now. Next on the council's agenda is Wilson himself, and well, Wesley snaps, albeit understandably. You see, it would have been a bit better if Gwen acted alone during the hit against Mr. Negative's bomb factory. As Wesley puts it, this would have given them the opportunity to spin the story so that it looked like there was simply infighting going on amongst Wilson's lieutenants. But since Gwen was seen working with the Green Goblin, this erased any benefit of the doubt and pretty much exposed Mysterio as an enemy of the Kingpin and his organization. Hearing all of this, Quentin accepts the fact that there's no turning back for the council anymore. He asks the last member of their group, an unnamed woman with black hair, what she thinks of this development. Surprisingly enough, this particular Mysterio agrees with Gwen's decision to bring the fight to their enemies. According to her, it's their mantra. After all, the Council of Mysterios exists to quote-unquote discover the truth of the world. And with that, the council comes to an agreement. War. Later that night, we find Pete and Harry in their superhero suits out on patrol. The web slinger asks when Gwen is coming, and Harry tells him that she'll meet up with him in an hour. Not one to waste precious time, Peter invites his best friend to some good old-fashioned crime busting. That is to say, they spend about 45 minutes dunking on a few B-listers in the city, such as Shocker, Tombstone, and Vermin. Realizing they still have a few minutes to spare, the wall crawler decides to visit the Parker residence, only to find out that it's seen some better days. Otto has been slumming it at the Parker's flat, and he hears some rustling in the living room, which prompts him to storm into the room with a baseball bat. Of course, Pete simply thwips him up with a piping hot webbing, and he is not too pleased that Otto has been squatting in his family's home. Otto even took the liberty of stealing Pete's slippers. That's crossing a line right there. Harry tells Pete to chill and admits that he's partially to blame here. After all, he was the one who sent Otto to keep tabs on the Parker residence to keep Pete and his family safe in case Wilson's men came sniffing around. In any case, Spidey and the Green Goblin decide to table this discussion and head out to meet Gwen. Along the way, Pete basically forgives Harry for his decision to send Otto to their home, and he even appreciates how his best friend did him a solid, looking out for his family. That's because according to Peter, the only way he can do this job as Spider-Man is if he knows MJ and the rest of his family are safe. We then get a flashback from a few hours ago, just as MJ, May, Ben, and Jonah arrive at the trailer park. They soon discover that Richard is nowhere to be found, only leaving a note for his mom on the door. Moving the clock back an hour earlier, we find out that Richard has been DMing with Felicia. We get the reveal that they're now officially boyfriend and girlfriend. And to make things worse, Felicia has Richard absolutely catwhipped, so much so that it only takes one message from her asking him to come back to New York to help her with a problem she has. As you'd expect from a teenage boy with raging hormones who has just gotten a girlfriend, Richard doesn't think twice about it. So in spite of the Picotech suit's warnings, Richard rushes off to the same plane his dad and Harry have boarded to hitch a ride to the city. To do this, he activates the suit's cloaking device and sneaks into the aircraft. He even accidentally eavesdrops on Harry, telling Pete that Gwen is actually Mysterio. In the present, we see Richard in his black Picotech spider suit swinging towards Felicia's building, and the two lovebirds meet up. But the suit's worst fears are realized when Richard discovers that Felicia has set a trap for him, because in that same room is Wilson and a squad of his bullseye goons. As you'd expect, the Kingpin's mere presence is enough to intimidate even the hardiest of heroes in the Marvel Universe, much less a young vigilante in training like Richard. But Wilson reassures the boy that no harm will come to him as long as he gives up Spider-Man. Obviously shaken, Richard turns to Felicia and asks her if she's been playing him all along. Felicia reassures him that she has feelings for him, but on the other hand, she stresses the fact that it's in her nature to screw over anyone she needs to. It's the middle of July, and a couple of lovebirds, Felicia Hardy and Richard Parker, meet on top of one of New York's many towering skyscrapers. There's trouble in paradise though, because this meetup comes hot on the heels of the duo's most recent adventure, a brush with the Kingpin of New York himself, Wilson Fisk. Richard asks Felicia how she's doing, to which she says she's fine. She throws back the question at Richard, and he says his mom and dad have recently grounded him. The question is it because he helped Felicia the Black Cat, or because of what he did during their fateful meeting with Fisk and his men? We finally get a big reveal as to what exactly went down in this ill-fated mission, as our story moves the clock backwards to a few weeks ago. Last month, Richard had found himself cornered by several of New York's most dangerous criminals. But then we soon find out that Richard didn't get trapped in there with them, they got trapped in there with him. Because the moment Richard's Picotech HUD sensed trouble, the darn thing took all over our boy's suit and effectively transformed itself into the one and only lethal protector of the Marvel Universe, Venom. As Venom took over, he ran down each and every threat it registered in the building. In fact, the Kingpin himself only made it out of there by the skin of his teeth. Not to mention that Venom's rampage only stopped when Richard heard Felicia's voice calling for mercy on behalf of her dad, the OG Black Cat. In the present, at the heart of Fisk Tower, Wilson and his lieutenants partake in another one of their meetings. Save for a couple of members of this villainous council, no one knows what happened to one of their members, Kraven the Hunter. Even Fisk has started to get concerned, seeing that Kraven hasn't been around for a few months now. A couple of people in the room who truly know what happened to Kraven, Moleman, and Wesley attempt to divert Fisk's attention. As they put it, perhaps Kraven just left New York for more peaceful pastures, or maybe maybe the man had decided to align himself with one of their traitorous members, Mysterio. Fisk ultimately did not get the answer when Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, proposes to use his abilities to interrogate each and every person in the room, something that the Kingpin takes offense towards. The situation only dissolves when Lee tries to step up to Wilson, thinking that fighting with the Kingpin would be a good idea. But Mr. Fisk is smarter than that to engage in senseless acts of violence. He calms everyone down and puts the meeting back on track. So they move their topic to another problem that their criminal organization is facing, the monster that laid out several of their men last month, the monster that is Richard Parker. To this end, Fisk proposes to let Felicia lay low for a while, knowing that she has a romantic relationship with the boy. Simply put, she can't be one of the New York's crime bosses if she's dating a literal superhero. In any case, Wilson comes to one conclusion, that he'd soon find the names of their adversaries and take them out with his own hands. Unknown to these crime bosses, a couple of vigilantes are listening in on their secret meeting. Harry Osborn, the Green Goblin, and his partner, Gwen Stacy, one of the Mysterios. Later that day, Mole Man and one of his subjects dig a hole through the abandoned Parker residence, only to be greeted by the web-slinging hero himself, Spider-Man. As Pete puts it, he's been visiting this place on the daily, hoping that someone like Mole Man would turn up. And now, the villain is here. The two men get to talking, and Spidey inadvertently blurts out that he and MJ expect that they'll be back here soon. But Mole Man knows better. With everything that's gone down between New York's heroes and villains, Parkers have a snowball's chance of living a normal life again. Mole Man clarifies that Fisk and his lieutenants are going to be hounding the Parkers from here on out. And a more curious note, Mole Man offers a helping hand towards Pete and his allies. On the other hand, the old man wonders why Peter just doesn't permanently deal with all the enemies they're facing. Of course, the wall crawler is having none of it. As he puts it, they're simply lines he won't cross, even if it means he has to suffer for it. Spidey grows tired of their conversation and dismisses Mole Man. Before leaving though, the old man reminds our hero that his offer still stands. All the web slinger needs to do is ask. That same night, Richard sneaks into the Parker's safe house, only to be whipped up by his dad. But the kid has someone bigger to worry about, because Pete's not alone in this room. His mom, MJ, is still right there with them, and she is absolutely furious that Richard snuck out of the house in spite of being grounded. In any case, Richard is sent back to his room, and we find out that the Parkers are currently holed up in Anna Watson's house, who happens to be MJ's aunt. Not long after, Pete and MJ go to their room to have a private conversation. And yes, although MJ promised her husband that she trusts his decisions with her life, we can't blame MJ when she tells Pete how tired she is of living life on the run. MJ demands her husband to tell her what he knows, especially what they've been running away from. Peter's not entirely comfortable with the idea of roping his wife into all of this vigilantism, but he trusts her as much as she does him. So Pete comes clean. For the first time, he reveals everything that's been going on between him, Harry, Gwen, and Fisk for the last year. It's now August, and we find ourselves at a swanky restaurant that Harry and Gwen had rented for the night to have dinner with their closest friends, MJ and Pete. Gwen is starting to have doubts that the Parkers aren't going to show up, especially considering that MJ now knows all the dirt about them. But Harry reassures her that Pete and MJ are the kind of people you can always count on. And speak of the devil, the Parkers show up mere moments after Gwen mentions them. And funnily enough, Pete and MJ still can't get used to the idea of hanging out with 1%ers. But as Harry tells them, the main reason he and his wife rented out this whole establishment tonight was so no one can find out that Harry's still alive, especially Fisk and his lieutenants. As you'd expect, the two couples trade pleasantries with one another before MJ expresses how much she's looking forward to hearing the full story behind New York's infamous vigilantes. Harry promises her that they'll tell her everything. Still, MJ doesn't fully buy into it. After all, they've met at settings like this in the past, and everyone kept her out of the loop then. Why should it change now? But ultimately, MJ puts her trust in Pete, Harry, and Gwen. While all this is happening, we learn that MJ and Pete have invited good old Uncle Ben to babysit Richard and May at Aunt Anna's house. Little May is sent off to bed, while Ben and Richard have a heart-to-heart about what's been bugging the young man. Back at the restaurant, not a single one in the group is interested in chowing down on some gourmet dishes. Instead, Gwen invites MJ to ask any question that she has about what she, Harry, and Pete have been up to. So MJ fires away. Instead of asking a question though, the fiery redhead makes it known how unhappy she is about all the things her husband and the Osborns have been doing. In turn, Gwen correctly surmises that MJ is actually worried about Richard and May. Meanwhile, Pete and Harry throw out and reassure MJ that the kid's safety is their top priority, not to mention protecting everyone they love, present company included. On the other hand, Gwen, as abrasive as it might sound, correctly susses out MJ's point once again, that what she's truly asking is the cost of this crusade against the Kingpin and his lieutenants. MJ doesn't deny it. In fact, she makes it clear how terrified she is of what might happen to their friends and family should things get out of hand. Gwen attempts to ease MJ's mind, mentioning how she herself betrayed the Council of Mysterios just to save her husband. But it doesn't help at all. In fact, MJ is floored with the idea that Gwen has been a secret sorcerer illusionist working with the other Mysterios this whole time. Pete and Harry notice things are getting a little heated, so the two men try to calm everyone down. Back at Aunt Anna's, Richard unloads on Uncle Ben, which basically boils down to a couple of things. 1, Richard thinks it's unfair he's been grounded for helping Felicia. And 2, the boy isn't really happy that MJ and Pete are coddling him when he knows he could put the Pictotech suit to good use as this universe's other Spider-Man. Meanwhile, at the high-end restaurant, MJ makes her feelings known about this whole deal, how she's compromised enough to satisfy Pete, Harry, and Gwen's self-appointed crusade against New York's most dangerous criminals. The long and short of it is MJ can't take it anymore, so she's only got one question for the three. Where does this all end? Harry understands where MJ's coming from, but he also doesn't lie about their main mission. As he puts it, the only way out of this mess is through it. And when MJ asks what he means by this, Gwen coldly answers that this crusade will only be finished when their side wins. Something dawns on MJ, but she doesn't show it. She instead excuses herself to the ladies' room. On the other hand, Peter isn't too happy with how the Osborns handled this whole conversation, so Gwen steps up and tells the two men that she'll talk to MJ and follows her to the restroom. Back at Anna's, JJ and Madeline Watson, MJ's mom, have just arrived home from their date. Triple J isn't too happy that Madeline has just changed her mind about spending the night together. On top of that, things get a little bit weird when Ben asks her if she had fun on her date with Jonah, to which she says she's getting there. Back at the restaurant, Gwen not so much apologizes as she does dictate what MJ's feeling right now. As Gwen tells her, the two of them couldn't be any more different. Gwen thinks of herself as someone who has had all her dreams and idealism beaten out of her ever since she was young, while MJ is the exact opposite. Now, MJ doesn't have patience to deal with Gwen's rather cold and calculating attitude right now, so she simply asks her what she wants. Gwen cuts to the chase and tells her she and Harry need Peter if they're gonna bring down Fisk and his council. She goes on to say that Pete and his spider powers might be the edge they need to win this war. The problem is, Gwen believes that Spider-Man has one glaring weakness in his game, that he's not willing to make the hard call in order to put their enemies 6 feet under. MJ takes issue with Gwen's opinion about her husband, prompting her to comment how Gwen herself has her own weakness as Mysterio. It's the fact that Gwen mostly derives her abilities from a mystic amulet she and the other members of the councils share. Now, Gwen throws some shade at MJ. Specifically, Gwen admits that she's pretty much useless without the amulet, just like MJ and her kids. Even worse, Gwen pushes MJ's button further when she tells her that she might be useless from time to time, but MJ and her children, they're a walking liability in every minute of every day. Again, MJ takes note of that, but our girl does her best to keep her composure. And when she's done talking, MJ only has one question for her. When does Gwen get her amulet back? Gwen says it's going to take another 11 days before her turn with the artifact again. MJ might not have freaky master illusionist powers, but you know what she has? A solid fist that she sends right into Gwen's arrogant face. So yeah, that should teach Gwen not to badmouth the Parkers. With Gwen out cold, MJ steps out of the restroom and returns to their table. She's not here for drinks. Instead, she has a few choice words for her husband and his best friend. For Peter, it's that he's a good man. For Harry, though, MJ has a warning that he could be a good man too. But Gwen is gonna get them all killed if they let her run her mouth and have her way with everything. MJ's right too, because unknown to our heroes, Martin Lee is already making preparations inside his lair. His next target, Mysterio. It's now September, and we see Fisk's most trusted confidant, James Wesley, get out of his car on his way to work. On any other day, it's just business as usual. Too bad for Wesley though, because today might just be the beginning of the end for him. A man in a mask tells Wesley's bodyguard Bullseye to take care of him. Wesley mistakes the intruder for a panhandler, but he immediately learns his mistake when Bullseye knocks the wind out of him and loads him up in the car's trunk after covering his head with a bag. An hour later, Wesley finds himself in a dark room surrounded by a couple of armed men. He soon learns that the same guy from earlier was no ordinary disenfranchised New Yorker. It's actually Martin Lee, and now Wesley has become a hostage to Mr. Negative and his demons. We find out that Bullseye wasn't exactly working for him. Instead, Lee uses powers to take over the hitman's mind just an hour ago. Given that Bullseye has served his purpose, of course, Lee decides to tie up all the loose ends in this secret mission of his. All Wesley can do is blurt out empty threats at Mr. Negative, but he's not worried about Fisk's wrath though. He's not even worried about Wesley not giving him the answers he wants, because this isn't an interrogation. All Lee has to do is use his powers to dig deep into the hostage's mind. Before that, Lee decides to pretty much tell Wesley this whole origin story. As we learn, Lee grew up in a tough town somewhere in Asia. He wasn't alone then, he had an older sister with him. At the time, the two siblings scraped by doing odd jobs that weren't exactly legal. Lee recalls the first time his powers emerged was when he took out a 2-bit goon who had tried to shake him and his sister down. Afterwards, Lee revealed his curious superhuman abilities to his sister, who then saw this as an opportunity to take over their apparent boss's turf. Long story short, Lee's big sis basically turned him into their muscle as the two methodically erased any rivals in their path. Back to the present, Ben and Jonah are busy working at the paper's offices, trying to craft a coherent story that would tie up each and every crime boss in New York to one another. They have a breakthrough as the two journalists figure out if they want to get the full picture of their story, they're going to have to hit it right at the source, Wilson Fisk. Somewhere else, Harry pays his top researcher, Dr. Otto Octavius, a visit to his lab. Curiously, we learn that Otto has found his own radioactive spider specimen, though for what purpose he intends to use it remains to be seen. Instead, Otto and Harry's conversation revolves around Harry asking him for advice about Gwen. To that, Otto has one answer: Harry should just consider getting a divorce from this nutty, overzealous wife. Our story then returns to Mr. Negative's saga as he continues to tell his entire story to Wesley. We find out that he and his sister eventually took over their town before moving somewhere bigger, New York. From there, the duo continued to upend the underworld until Lee and his sister eventually became a couple of the city's most powerful gangsters. Lee's momentum was eventually curbed when he came across the #1 crime lord, Wilson Fisk. As you'd expect, the two threw hands at each other the moment they met. They lost that fight, but he was surprised that Fisk didn't end him right then and there. Instead, the man drafted him to become his lieutenant. In the present, Wesley struggles to resist Mr. Negative's attempts to worm his way into his mind. But a man can only take so much. He breaks, and Wesley is forced to reveal the truth behind his loyalties, that he's actually one of the Mysterios. A day later, the Council of Mysterios engage in a meeting. Wesley's there, and no one knows what had happened to him just a day ago. We also get introduced to a new member of the council, a woman named Ahan. In any case, this whole meeting centers around the council demanding Gwen to lay out each and every detail of her plans to take down Fisk. Otherwise, she can consider herself an enemy of the council. Gwen ultimately agrees, and the council soon finds itself united once again. On the other hand, Gwen and the other Mysterios notice how Wesley hasn't said a word since their meeting started. Our story then goes on to reveal that Ahan is actually Martin's sister. It turns out that the two siblings had a falling out after she learned how her baby brother pretty much became Wilson's subordinate after their first encounter. Now we learn exactly what Lee did to Wesley the day before. Simply put, Mr. Negative has sunk his hooks into Wesley. In the present, Wesley finally starts talking, and all he can do is apologize to the rest of the council for what he's about to do. The man cries, telling everyone that none of this was his choice, given Lee has taken over the wheel now. On top of that, we discover that Lee doesn't just have eyes on the Council of Mysterios, they're just one part of his grand plan, because at this same moment, he sent out his demons to deal with anyone and everyone he deems a threat, whether it's his fellow lieutenant or one of the Spider-Men. Back at the council, his sister instantly instantly recognizes that her brother has put Wesley up to this, as the man reveals that he's been forced to strap several C4 explosives to his chest. Regardless, none of the other Mysterios can do anything about it other than scream as the bombs go off, catching everyone in the immediate vicinity in a fiery explosion. It's now December, and Spider-Man stalks the city. Past New York's proud skyscrapers, the web-slinger eventually reaches his destination, a Chinese restaurant where he's supposed to pick up his takeout order. Money changes hands, the food is delivered, and the wall crawler whips up a makeshift backpack to keep the chow secure. Spidey soon enters the sewers, and from there, an entirely strange new world opens up as he reaches what looks like an ancient subterranean city right underneath the city that never sleeps. Right now, this particular web slinger isn't who you might think it is. It's neither Pete nor Richard. It's actually Otto under that mask. Someone superior like him has no business skulking in the depths of New York like a rat. Regardless, Otto does his duty and soon arrives at a secret safe house somewhere in this underground complex. This place has become our hero's newest sanctuary as Otto hands over the takeout order to MJ and May. And to Otto's credit, May actually likes how he's stepped up and taken on the Spider-Man mantle as well. Afterwards, Otto asks MJ if Jonah and Ben are ready to proceed with the bombshell broadcast they're about to drop on New York. The genius scientist is getting restless, so he pays the two old newsmen a visit and asks them when exactly they can expect the broadcast to release. Ben reassures him that tonight is the night everything comes to light. For now, it's dinner time. It's here we find out the reason our heroes have found themselves in this subterranean world. It's all thanks to Mole Man. He's welcomed the Parkers and their closest friends and family to take refuge in his kingdom. Dinner is just about to start when Otto notices that a couple of people are missing from their party. Pete and Harry. MJ explains that the two vigilantes are currently on the field. Out there above ground, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin are currently busy dealing with the horde of bullseyes that Fisk has sent for them. Our heroic duo admittedly breaks a little bit of a sweat in taking down these cloned bullseyes, but it's nothing that they can't handle. Later, after dunking on the genetically altered goons, Pete tries to coax Harry into coming to dinner with him. After all, he knows it's probably not the best option to leave Harry to his own devices these days, especially after what happened to Gwen just a couple months ago. But the Green Goblin insists he's alright. He tells Pete to head home and enjoy some time with the rest of his family while he prepares to go on another patrol. Pete reluctantly agrees, and with Peter out of sight, Harry speaks to someone using his comms, telling the other person on the line that they're all clear. Back in the underground hideout, Otto presents Richard with a device he personally crafted to mess with the Maker's tech. Specifically, this gadget was made to scrub any and all information about the Parkers from the Maker and his council's database. The problem is, they have to physically hook it up to the Maker's grid. Even worse, it's somewhere deep in Fisk's lair. Otto more or less tasks Richard with doing this job, something that the boy gladly accepts. Not too far away, MJ asks Pete where Harry is. The couple can only worry about their friend and wonder what they'd do if Peter lost MJ or vice versa. In a romantic twist, Pete and MJ finally get the alone time they needed since the early part of this series. Let's just say Spidey literally sweeps her off her feet. Afterwards, MJ basks in the afterglow, but Pete can't help but shake off the feeling that something bad is about to happen soon. Above ground, Richard meets up with Felicia and asks for her help to sneak into Fisk Tower in order to install Otto's device, a task that Felicia is more than up for. Somewhere else still, the Green Goblin finally meets up with the person that he was talking to earlier after Pete left, as they stalk the Kingpin's compound atop a helipad. Suddenly, Mysterio, or what appears to be something like Mysterio, emerges. An hour later, back to our hero's underground hideout, Otto has found himself on the receiving end of MJ's wrath when she found out that Richard had gone to Fisk Tower alone. Pete chooses to table the discussion for now and instead get to Richard as soon as possible. Pete tells Otto to come with him, but he refuses. Ben and Jonah need him for the upcoming broadcast they're about to do. With no other choice, Pete sets off alone, promising MJ he'll bring Richard back safely. Otto hands Pete another fresh new invention, and the friendly Spider-Man swings off. MJ leaves too, but not before reassuring Otto that this discussion is not yet finished. Thinking he's now alone, Otto starts grumbling about why everyone's grilling him, but he doesn't notice, however, as May has been inside the room the whole time. She knows that Richard didn't come up with the solo mission alone. May expresses her disappointment at Otto. Meanwhile, Richard and Felicia scale the side of Fisk Tower. They eventually make it to the Maker's grid, only to find out that the doors to their destination are heavily guarded by Fisk's security system. Back at the safe house, Otto, Ben, and Jonah gather around to make the final preparations for their broadcast. Mole Man arrives to witness all of this unfold, and with the press of a button on their computer, Ben and Jonah finally drop the biggest story to hit 6160's New York. Each and every screen in New York starts flashing images of Wilson Fisk, while a voice narrates the truth behind the Kingpin, how he and his cronies have deceived the city for their own purposes. More than that, the broadcast tells New York the even bigger truth, that Wilson isn't even the guy, he's just a lackey that the Maker and his council installed in New York to serve as their enforcer. Inside Wilson's office, New York's head honcho struggles to keep his head together while the broadcast continues to air out all of his dirty laundry. Fisk suddenly hears Martin's voice asking him if he knows where the broadcast is coming from. Mr. Negative is not here to help as he pushes through his own grand plan. Right now, all Lee wants to do is put his hands on the man who once kept him in his place, so he challenges Fisk to a duel, something that the Kingpin gladly accepts. Somewhere else, Harry and Mysterio have sprung their ambush, and they're currently faced with another bunch of bullseyes. However, a big old melee fails to transpire when the bullseyes suddenly hear a voice from the building's comms telling them to stand down and let the duo pass. Inside his office, Wilson and Lee promptly begin their fight. The Kingpin warns Mr. Negative that he's gonna have a fate worse than death if he finds out that he was the one behind Wesley's disappearance. Not too far away, Richard and Felicia mess up their infiltration mission when the young spider hero accidentally trips one of the building's alarms. At the same time, Pete crashes through Fisk Tower and right into Wilson's office. This prompts Lee and Wilson to set aside their beef for now and deal with their mutual enemy instead, Spider-Man. Back to the kids, Richard and Felicia find themselves between a rock and a hard place when the tower's defense systems kick in. The two teenage vigilantes try to fend off their cybernetic attackers, but ultimately they get caught. On a more curious note, Richard's suit reveals that Fisk Tower is using the same kind of picotech to attack them. While this is happening, Peter has found that he's got his work cut up for him, as Wilson gives him an epic beatdown that most definitely rocks Spider-Man. The Kingpin eventually gets the better of our hero, forcing Pete to reach for his comms and call Harry for help. In the meantime, we learn that Harry and Mysterio have come face to face with one of the Maker's council members, Henry Duggery, aka Captain Britain. Henry actually rules the region of Earth 6160 known as the European Union, but since Howard Stark's betrayal of the Maker, New York and the rest of the so-called American Union has been redistributed to both Henry and the Hulk. Right now, Henry tells Mysterio and Harry how curious he is to see how Mysterio would run things should they be installed as this territory's steward. At the same moment, Harry receives Pete's distress call, and in spite of his Norman Osborn-themed HUD advice to choose saving Pete over sticking with whatever is left of his wife, Harry ultimately chooses to abandon his best friend, while Fisk and Mr. Negative continue to lay the smackdown on the wall crawler. Back at the hideout, Ben and the others send out another broadcast, this time a call for action to everyone who wants to bring down the Maker's regime. Inside Fisk's office, the two villains wail on Spider-Man until he falls. Mr. Negative thinks their job is done here, as he tells Wilson to finish off the web slinger while he deals with Richard and Felicia. But they're wrong, this is far from over. Pete digs deep and gets back on his feet. He's just getting started. Richard and Felicia are currently deep within Wilson's building as his security system does its work on the kids. Harry witnesses the meeting between his wife, Mysterio, or at least a part of Mysterio, and Henry Duggery. And as for our friendly neighborhood web slinger, well, Peter only has one question for the Kingpin. Are they gonna end this thing right now or not? Pete gets into his stance, ready to fight with New York's top dog. Meanwhile, Mr. Negative suggests that Wilson should give Spider-Man a fighting chance, allow him to die a warrior's death. But the Kingpin didn't become the city's ruler through honor. As Wilson puts it himself, he has no interest in a fair fight or grand gestures of respect. He wants his enemies dead and his scores settled. So Mr. Negative has no choice but to agree. He tries working his magic on Pete, giving him the explicit command to not fight while Wilson beats him to a pulp. What these villains didn't count on was how clever Peter is. Spider-Man is able to protect himself from Wilson without actually fighting. He does this by shutting Mr. Negative's mouth with webbing and using him as a human shield who takes the brunt of Wilson's mean right overhand. With Mr. Negative taking a much-deserved nap on the floor of Kingpin's office, Peter finds himself in the most ideal position here, a one-on-one fight with New York's most dangerous man. So our hero repeats his order. Let's end this. Further below the office, inside Wilson's vault, Felicia and Richard continue their desperate struggle against nano-security systems. Richard calls on his Pictotech suit to do its thing, and although the suit knows the vault's nanosystems are high-tech and complex, it can't hold a candle to the Pictotech itself. So Richard's suit adapts to the conditions of the vault, transforming him into Venom. Richard and his suit manage to wriggle Felicia out of her restraints, and the Black Cat attempts to reach the vault's locks, while Richard deals with the nano tendrils coming after them. Felicia reaches it, but hacking through the system is gonna take a minute. To make matters worse, the tendrils overwhelm Richard and his Venom suit, forcing them to let a few nano tendrils slip through their defenses and towards Felicia. Richard, of course, jumps into action to protect his girlfriend, but things get even more dicey when the Pictotech suit informs them that the vault's nano-security systems is copying its own code. This ultimately allows the vault's nanosystem to transform itself into a fake, white-hued copy of Venom specifically designed to take down Richard's suit, the anti-Venom. Back in Wilson's office, both he and Spider-Man take a second to check what's happening in the vault. Wilson is sure that his security systems are more than enough to take out Richard and Felicia, but Peter has other plans. Our hero produces a gadget from his suit, a syringe, which we find out that Otto created for the specific purpose of nullifying Wilson's physical augmentations. In a flashback, we see the ultimate fate of the Bullseye that Harry had taken hostage back then. You see, Wilson's tech upgrades share the same qualities as the one that Bullseye had been using. And well, let's just say Otto and the Green Goblin turned one of the Marvel's universe most dangerous assassins into their lab rat to make their own anti-Wilson serum. In the present, Spidey leaps with his syringe in hand, ready to jab it into the Kingpin, but Wilson manages to get the better of the web slinger when he cracks him with his left hand. Peter is forced to let go of the syringe. The wall crawler recovers from the hit while listening to Wilson's classic supervillain monologue. Wilson explains he's happy that he'll get to not only take out his arch nemesis, but pretty much eradicate Peter's whole bloodline from Earth 6160 after this whole mess is finished. Down at the vault, Richard's Pictotech suit pulls no punches as it tears off Anti-Venom's head. Problem is, Anti-Venom, like the mythological Hydra, takes one head off and a couple more spring to life. A stroke of good luck comes to our heroes when Felicia finally hacks the vault open, but it's here where the Pictotech suit reveals to Richard that the entire vault structure is made up of the same nanotech as the anti-venoms in front of them. So Richard has a couple of choices here, either make a run for it or hook up Otto's doodad to the vault's main console to render our hero's presence invisible to Wilson's security system. But the apple doesn't fall far from the Parker tree. Richard chooses to continue with their mission. Meanwhile, Spidey witnesses all of this from a live feed inside Wilson's office. The Kingpin, still unaware that comic book superheroes always win in the end, continues to gloat about his impending victory. He tells Pete that he'll bury his and his family's bodies separately just so they can be apart forever. But what Wilson doesn't know is that this whole empire is about to crumble, because back at home, J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben are just about ready to make their public announcement outing Wilson Fisk's super shady dealings with the Maker's Council. It echoes all throughout New York, even inside Wilson's own building, while the Kingpin and Spider-Man continue their duel. Pete soon finds an opening as he uses Wilson's face as a springboard in order to reach the serum. As Kingpin sees red and attempts to hit Pete with a few haymakers, haymakers, but our hero just dances around his strikes with the usual reflexes of a man with the proportionate strength of a spider. And before Wilson even notices, Pete has already driven the syringe into the back of his neck. The results are instantaneous as Wilson gets immediately depowered, but there's no quitting on this guy. He continues going after Spider-Man even in his current state. While all this is happening, Richard and Felicia have finally made it to the vault's main console. It's just a few meters away, and all they need is a second to hook up Otto's device and this whole mess will end. But it's a second that they just might not have. It only takes a few moments before Felicia and Richard are overwhelmed yet again with even more anti-venom units popping up to block our hero's path. So Richard makes the call. He slips out of the suit to try and reach the main console himself. Back in the office, Spider-Man has just given Mr. Fisk the beating he both needs and deserves. Still, the villain smiles, and when Pete asks why, Wilson points out that our hero is about to lose his own son. Because as the live feed shows, Richard is about to get caught by the vault's nano tendrils. Spider-Man wastes no time and makes a beeline for the vault, while Felicia can only desperately look on as the nano tendrils engulf Richard. But Pete's firstborn son is a trooper. Richard brute forces his way through the vault's security measures and manages to activate Otto's device. Just in the nick of time too, because when Peter arrives, what he sees isn't the worst fear coming to life. Instead, he witnesses the entire vault's security system coming down, while Richard and Felicia share a tender kiss. Our heroes prepare to leave Fisk Tower just as Jonah and Ben's broadcast winds down. New Yorkers who have listened to it have taken to the streets in protest. For all intents and purposes, the Kingpin's kingdom has fallen. Somewhere else, Harry watches as Mysterio and Henry finalize their deal. In the aftermath of the broadcast, Wilson and Mr. Negative take a moment to go to the tower's rooftop and talk about the effects of everything that has happened. We learn that the deal between Mysterio and Henry has effectively lost Wilson his job. That is to say, Mysterio now rules over New York, while he and his remaining lieutenants have been cast aside. Mr. Negative asks Wilson why he doesn't feel the least bit furious about this. And say what you will about the Kingpin, but the man is a bona fide competitor if nothing else. As Wilson puts it, he's not at all mad about losing his position. In fact, he's excited to fight tooth and nail to regain his power and prestige. Wilson couldn't have said it better. All this has made him feel alive for the first time in years. But here's the thing, Wilson isn't the only one with grand ambitions for New York. Mr. Negative originally came to this building to take out the Kingpin himself. And now that he has the chance, Mr. Negative takes advantage and uses his power of persuasion to control Wilson and tell him to jump off the building. Wilson can barely resist, but he's able to hang on to the ledge long enough to grab Mr. Negative's leg in the process. And even though he uses his uncanny ability to try and force Wilson to let go, the Kingpin's willpower is just too strong. So Wilson grabs tighter and pulls. The two once powerful bosses of New York freefall hundreds of feet towards the streets. A day later, Wilson's demise is on the front page of the paper. Ben and Jonah make a toast to celebrate their win, and in the end, the two men come to the conclusion that for a couple of old journalists like them, retirement just isn't an option. Somewhere else inside the Oscorp building, Gwen reveals that she's cut a deal with the Makers Council to allow Harry and the Parkers to continue operating as vigilantes the way they see fit, as long as they don't get away with their own council's plans. On a sadder note, we find out that Gwen literally isn't what she used to be anymore. She's not Harry's wife. Hell, she's not even human anymore, thanks to the weird spell she and the Council of Mysterios cast in order for them to survive the lethal explosion they got caught in not too long ago. In other words, Gwen is just a cog in the whole Mysterio machine. Later, Harry goes to his lab and meets with Pete. He tells his best friend that he's finally decided to scrub the Norman Osborn AI from his Green Goblin suit. The two pals then have a talk, and Peter reassures Harry that they're cool in spite of everything that has happened. Their conversation ends with Harry asking Pete how he's able to continue working as Spider-Man knowing just what it costs. The answer comes in the form of a flashback. It's here we learn that Pete and MJ didn't actually have a plan for Richard. They conceived him back when they were still dating in college. Long story short, this was the moment when Peter realized that he had something he was willing to live and die for: MJ and their family. In the present, the Parker family finally gets to move back to their old flat. It turns out that Otto had been paying their rent while they were gone, and Pete made sure to refurbish the place here and there. The kids settle in, while Pete and MJ have a private conversation. MJ asks Peter what he told Harry when he asked what keeps him going. And well, the Ultimate-Spiderman series ends with a scene that would bring a single proud tear to Vin Diesel's eye. It's all about family.